Now, if you need a new organ, you just print it, surgically attach it, then you have the peptides to heal from that recovery. It sounds creepy, but we can kind of manufacture humanity, which might be for the worse. It's going to save a lot of lives.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, our guest is Alex Kikel. Is that right? Or
yep.
Kikel?
Whatever you're going to call me, I don't care.
Well, I always screw it up anyhow, so it doesn't really matter. It's become a thing on the podcast, so it is what it is. You're the founder of the Prep Coach, and you work with a diversity of clients ranging from professional athletes, physique competitors, power lifters, I don't want to say patients. I don't want to say patients.
Dysfunctional populations.
Just dysfunctional populations as well. And the topic that we're really going to get into today is going to be more peptide related, nootropics and stuff like that. And that's where your expertise is at. It's where people that we've had on the podcast are referencing you.
Oh, that's
right?
cool.
So so after a while, you're kind of like, well, maybe we just need to get the guy that everybody is referencing to see where it's all kind of coming from. And Tom is a geek when it comes to this stuff. So he's going to be assisting on this because most of this just goes over my head, but I'm really good at coming in and saying, like, what did you just say?
Yep.
To be able to bring it back down to the normal people. I'm just the person that just takes what people tell me to take.
Sometimes that works.
That would be the majority of people though, right?
Yep.
Right. And the problem with that, as you both can attest to, is who you're listening to. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you're like, just tell me what to take. And then you're listening to a moron. Then you have issues that can rear its head right then or many years later, as we'll talk about as we get into this thing. So what do you want to jump off with?
Well, I guess the first point I've got down here, which I think is interesting, what I've heard you reference to quite a few times when you're talking about peptides. We're going to put things in there like glutathione and carnitine, even though they're not, right? You've kind of referred to them as like medicine 3.0. Right? So like to you, you see these categories of products as like a revolution for health, like a new wave, right? So what does that represent to you when you say like these are going to be medicine 3.0? What makes you make that statement, and how do you think that hopefully they're going to change the demographic of longevity and healthcare for everyone?
I say it's medicine 3.0 because to me, medicine 3.0 represents the future of never having problems again. Mm-hmm. And that sounds kind of ridiculous to say out loud, but after you've seen so many things that were technically impossible happen because of one supplement, one peptide, one small molecule, one therapy, you start to go, okay, there's all these tools. We're creating new and new tools every day. So we're learning about 100-ish new peptides every single day. That's a lot. Mm-hmm. So as we're solving all these problems, medicine 3.0 to me is like that next evolution in humanity to where no one has problems anymore. And you can focus on what humanity was supposed to be, which is truly helping each other. Mm-hmm. You know, like you're still chasing your own goals, doing your own thing, but it's elevating the entire human race. So that's honestly what I see as medicine 3.0, where no one has problems anymore. Cancer is not a bad word anymore. No one has to worry about getting injured from heavy squats. No one, like, whatever the problem is, you can fix it with medicine 3.0.
So when you make statements like that, like people aren't going to have any problems anymore, I know you can't name specifics perhaps, but what are some of the things that you've seen happen with these types of compounds that, you know, maybe 10 years ago would just be absolutely ridiculous and unthinkable?
Yeah, hold that, because something that came to my mind when you were saying that is there is some context and validation behind what you're saying. GLP-1s have been around for a long time. Metformin was around for a long time before it became popular. Armour Thyroid was a supplement before it became popular. Clenbuterol was sold over the counter before it became...
Exactly.
So there is context to say, you know, the things that you're working with now, 5 years, it won't even be 5 years, a couple years from now are going to be more mainstream than they are now. Because they didn't just come to be. Yeah. Like the GLP-1s didn't just, boom, here they are. They've been like 30 years, 20 years, or something like that.
Yeah. Like everyone in our community, strength community, hypertrophy communities, everyone's used them at some point in their careers. Like they've been around forever. Same thing with the BPCs and TBs and all these different peptides. They've been around forever. So they have a really good track record.
Yeah.
And then some of the things that I've brought to the market, I've tried to get people to make and synthesize and sell commercially for like upwards of a decade. And no one wants to do it. And then eventually after you have so many case studies, the right person catches on, and that's the next big thing.
Yes.
That's what happened with SLU-PP332. That was like 6+ years in the making for me. Now everyone talks about it, everyone knows about it, but like I was trying to get that on the shelves, like pre-COVID era, you know?
Yes.
And all these things have a great track record.
Well, I think that's what people miss with all these conversations is they think that this stuff just came to be like last year.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's not the case. There's this underlying groundwork. So re-ask
No.
the question.
No. So I think for us right now, you know, we're in a scenario right now where, you know, people are generally becoming more dysfunctional. So first off, let's just see, you know, maybe to get some buy-in from the audience, perhaps. What are some of the, you know, like things that you've seen maybe with your own clients or in general that these types of peptides and products have done that like 5-10 years ago without their use would be impossible? Just a couple of examples so people know like what are we actually talking about here.
I'll do some big ones just to kind of catch everyone's attention, right? People that were unable to walk because of a spinal cord injury from a wrong attempted on a deadlift, able to walk again. People that had massive TBIs in like the football-based world, again, unable to think, unable to eat themselves, unable to feed themselves rather, able to feed again, walking again, playing again, no problems at all. People with massive cardiac problems, where in the past that would have been the death sentence and you got 2 years to live type thing. 10 years later, they're going strong. You can go all the way from those extreme examples to just the parent who's trying to get through their entire workday and then get home and still have the energy to play with their kids. So it goes from every spectrum, extreme to also minor.
Sure. So, you know, we're lucky we get a lot of very smart people on this podcast talking about various areas of expertise. And in general, I would say it's probably fair to say that most would seem perhaps underawed by the effects of peptides or their possibilities, right? Like, you know, we have people in from the bodybuilding world and the strength training world, and the question maybe comes up, like, do you see these as the next revolution in athletic performance? The answer is usually no, or probably not, depending on what comes out next couple of years. So I'm not trying to badmouth those individuals, but in this example, why do you think in general coaches or individuals are perhaps not seeing the benefits of these types of products that they could be? Like, what is holding people back?
Black and white mentality. No one's talking about replacing androgens or replacing the key principles that have gotten every top powerlifter, strongman, bodybuilder. Like, no one's talking about replacing. We're talking about doing things a bit more intelligently and maybe layering a new compound into the scenario. So I'll give examples later on, but we're talking about adjunctive therapies, pairing things together. So then maybe you don't have to take as much of certain harsher compounds so you can preserve your longevity. Because a lot of people say that they don't care when they die if they win the Olympia crown or if they hit a certain total or anything like that. But after your career, you're going to care about that. You know, you will care about it eventually. So you don't have to blunt your career by switching over and going completely opposite. But why not do a combination therapy? It can only help you.
Sure. So where do you see this going? And like, obviously, as you said, these peptides are like popping up every day. Who knows what, you know, the SLUP is the current kind of like in vogue one, right? Who knows what the next one's going to be and all this. So in the next, say like 5, 10, 20 years for Gen Pop, everyone, like what do you see their healthcare looking like? Like, is everyone going to have a little Tupperware in their fridge with some syringes and some vials in, like with their pet? Is that going to be the thing that everyone's house you go to, we're going to see that, do you think?
No, but they'll be in different delivery format because now we can make the topical products, the nebulized product, the intranasal, the pills. Like there's all these different formats coming out that are fairly easy to make. I'm trying to come up with one. So like you drink a soda pop, so you can encapsulate these peptides in nanobubbles and you just drink it. So you could have a drinkable peptide shot type thing, kind of like I had my ketones beforehand. So the delivery method is kind of the barrier to entry right now for Gen Pop. That's basically down. It just has to kind of get more mainstream. And then I do see it. I see it being in everyone's fridge and everything. And that's dependent upon how the powers that be will allow people to afford them, because people that don't have the money for it, that's where insurance is coming to play. And who knows about that world. But I do see it in 5 or 10 years, everyone's fridge, everyone's countertop, everywhere.
Sure. So I know you do a lot of work in like the dysfunctional world, you know, whether it's people with genuine chronic illnesses like cancers and things like that, or people who just want to feel better, you know, all day, every day. So before we kind of like go down the rabbit hole of listing all this really cool stuff that everyone's going to want to go on their phone and order once they've listened to this, we're living in a population that arguably is probably becoming more dysfunctional from year to year. So what do you see going on that probably needs to be done first before all of these types of therapies can perhaps have the impact they're meant to have? Because I assume, you know, we talk plenty of times like, you know, someone blasting PEDs. Well, if you put it into an unhealthy system, generally good things don't happen. I'm going to presume that we're kind of talking about the same thing here. These peptides can do great things, but if we're putting them in a dysfunctional system, we may not see the best benefit.
So actually, a lot of the peptides would work better in a dysfunctional scenario,
Okay,
because they're not reliant upon other energetic systems. So they're coming in as chemical messengers to turn on epigenetic expression. So you're not going to have like the big ones are BPC-157, TB-500, right? There's a couple negative side effects depending on the person, but it's very, very small percentages of individuals that get that. The majority of people will only turn on neonatal gene expression. So literally the things you had when you were a baby. So reverting you back to a neonatal state at a cellular level. It'll drive actin-based healing. It'll drive every type of healing from a fibroblast standpoint, everything in your body. It only turns healing on. It doesn't turn it off. It can't downregulate it. So they're almost side effect free, and they almost always only drive healing. Again, always negative side effects, always poor responders, but you technically can't take too much to a degree for most people. So that's kind of why they're like this medicine 2.0, because it's very alluring to people. It's like, oh, I almost can't get hurt with these. And I could also take it to make up for a bad supplement protocol with a high estrogen intake, or it'll potentiate those. So to me, it's more of looking at it from that perspective, where it's actually going to work better in a dysfunctional state because you'll notice it more because you're sicker.
yeah, for sure. Do you think that could almost create a problem in of itself? In that,
Oh, yeah.
I now have a Band-Aid that works even better the more I don't look after myself. And I know that's an oversimplification, but do you think that could almost create a problem where people become even more reliant on these external sources opposed to maybe the day-to-day stuff that they should be doing?
Yes, but at least they're still taking care of their health.
Yeah.
So you might not get them getting their nutrition perfect or doing some grounding work, or like some basic health practices, right? But at least they're still being healthier. It's like the cardiac scenario, right? Where you get a blood thinner, a blood pressure medication, like at least they're still there blunting the damage. It's not necessarily fixing, it's band-aiding the problem, but sometimes you need a Band-Aid. So even in that scenario, I'd be fine with someone doing that because at least they're not down regulating their health as much as they otherwise would be.
Now, will their body adapt to that compound over time?
No, that's the nice thing about it. There's no downregulatory receptor-mediated complex at all. So we essentially just have straight chemical signaling, and it will only turn epigenetic expression on.
So then what would happen when they go off?
You go back to how you normally heal. But the difference is if you keep them in long enough, then what do? You change your cellular structures. So all of these compounds we take are changing epigenetics. That's the day-to-day changes that can dictate whether you're going to have a heart attack in 10 years or a stroke or whatever arbitrary health problem, right? This is changing that. So once you take a peptide, a supplement, a pharmaceutical compound, it changes you genomically forever. So your epigenetics and your genetics. So technically, even when you come off, they still change at a cellular level to not be yourself anymore.
So we're looking at, having short-term and long-term benefits here for individuals, regardless of whether they keep them in a protocol for, the big thing will be like, say with GLP-1s, like, well, yeah, great, but what happens when I come off it and I'm starving again and I start overeating? But you're saying with a lot of these compounds, it could be a case of you can put this in for a year or 2 years or 6 months or whatever it might be, and you can reap benefits for considerable periods after that time.
Most definitely. Even like the GLP is a great example, right? So semaglutide, it modulates the cocaine and amphetamine receptor in your neural complexes. So anything that's an addictive behavior, you can downregulate. So you can come off of it, made those cortical changes, rehypertrophy your brain, so change the structure of your brain. It's not addicted to that behavior anymore. We've done that with alcohol. We've done that with oxy. We've done that with every kind of harsh drug out there, even with binge eating disorders. It's all an addiction. To a certain extent, you might do that with some athletes, like we talked about before in the Olympic world, where they're training 6 to 8 hours a day. That's an addictive behavior that's hurting them. So in any kind of addictive scenario, you could bring like a semaglutide in for that period of time, pull it out, and as long as you made the right architectural changes to your brain, it's not coming back because your brain's not the same structurally. And that should probably be said moving forward, right? We can change anything in our body. So the changes you make now, we say the term's plasticity, right? Our body is plastic, meaning it can change in any way. Our heart can get bigger or smaller. Our biceps can get bigger or smaller. Our brain can get bigger or smaller. Everything can be shifted, and then it's the actions you do daily that kind of, help you or hurt you.
So speaking of those daily actions then, before we get down this wonderful list that I've written down here, with the kind of dysfunction that you're seeing day to day, what are the biggest players you see in just general day-to-day habits and tasks that are like the low-hanging fruit for people before they start going out and buying their glutathione and their L-carnitine? Like, I presume if someone comes to you and they're like, I'm sleeping 2 hours a night, I'm eating Wendy's twice a day, or whatever, you're going to say, look, all that stuff's great. We want to put that in, but please first do X, Y, and Z. What's that hit list that you would probably put forward?
First one is going to be the hardest one for people to follow because it's all technology based. So everyone talks about the dangers of blue light. It's not so much blue light. It's the overexpression of blue light and the lack of near infrared. So all that means is essentially we're not getting any exposure from the sun like we used to back in the day, right? So we have all this extra blue light coming from the screens. It's not just the blue light though. We're all on social media. We're seeing different things that pop up and flux dopamine. So now you're on your screen all the time. You're dumping dopamine and serotonin. You're creating that artificial craving for those neurotransmitters, and then has a massive downregulation the next day. So as you're scrolling through social media, the more scrolling you do, the more that changes your neurochemistry and the more your brain atrophies. So now they're doing all the functional MRI studies with ChatGPT, with people that aren't looking at a book anymore. They're not even searching on Google anymore. They're just AI, teach me this, AI, do that for me. There's no critical thinking. Your brain has to think less. It's like if you stop squatting, you're probably going to get worse at squatting. If you stop thinking, you get worse at thinking. So your brain is starting to atrophy. It changes calcium fluxing. It does so many negative things. So technology is awesome. It's not bad, but moderation. So to me, the first easy step for most people is pull back on the technology as much as you can. Obviously, we all work jobs. You're not going to cut down screen time. So maybe get some blue light blocking glasses. Or if you're going to be scrolling on social media, give yourself 30 minutes. Give yourself 45 minutes, because a lot of people are spending hours upon hours. And just look at your data. Like, you just see how many hours you're spending. That's slowly making you, it's making our, as a society, it's lowering our IQ, and that's contributing to all the health dysfunctions. It's starting with our phones.
So what would be the impact then for a child born today that will know nothing but screens? So the exposure from the whole development is with screens, right? So we can speculate that, yes, that's all bad. But what if they don't know the brain's not been trained for any other thing? Is that then bad, or is that just the adaptation?
So the prefrontal cortex, the thing that makes our decisions and all that kind of cool stuff, or hypertrophies, and you like become an adult when that hypertrophy is 25.
Yeah.
That's been slowly pushed further and further back. I did some governmental work a number of years ago, and I thought our intentions of the project were to decrease that time. And by the time it was said and done, it was, here's the paycheck. Also, by the way, we're going in the opposite direction. So reversed engineered my work to essentially then say, okay, we are now atrophying more prefrontal cortexes so people aren't maturing until they're 35 or 45. And again, I don't like talking that kind of stuff, but it's reality. You know, it's a lot of things that go on that people don't think about. Because it's, again, it's not that technology is bad, it's not that blue light's bad, but it's that overexposure. So in that kind of scenario, you see it where people stop thinking, and you have that whole sheep mentality where everyone will follow the next trend on TikTok, everyone's talking about. The next thing they talk about on the news, everyone's worried about. Because if you have people fear, then they're going to consume. They're going to spend. And I'm not trying to make it like a negative twist on things, but you're starting to see children that aren't able to communicate with each other. They have no emotional connection. My kids are 6, 4, 2, and 8 years old, okay? I see a lot of their friends that can't interact in social environments. They don't know how to talk with their friends. They don't know how to interact. They have anxiety already at that age because they're on screens all the time. And you didn't see that with kids. Like, I wasn't like that when I was a kid. I'm 32 years now. Like, you didn't see that. I'm sure you didn't see that back in your day.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't have that many problems, and all of a sudden all these problems are happening. It's not just screens, but it's part of the problem.
Well, I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, but I am. You know, so
it's reality.
I don't think that was the intent.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the intent wasn't there, but when the discovery is made, you know, people can see benefits of that. Yeah. You know, for control votes. So
I agree. Yeah.
Because there's no B613 to go back to the old scandal TV show that I know of, but there could be. But I don't believe it's like the deep state said, we're going to do this.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
These phones, we're going to do this.
I agree.
We're going to do that.
Yeah.
I just think it's a second order, third order effect that's out there. But it's interesting that they want to lean into the other direction.
Yeah.
Which I'm trying to, like, through my brain, figure out if I was on that side, why? Like, what good would there be from that? You know, obviously control, right?
Money.
Yeah.
I mean, it all comes down to finance at the end of the day. If you look, because like no one watches commercials anymore, but I forget where we were at the other day, a couple of weeks ago, like in a hospital, in a doctor's office. And all the commercials are for vaccines. All the commercials are trying to sell you on things, but it's not just selling like, hey, here's my product. It's fear. And I am not against vaccines. I think vaccines have their place and purpose. I don't get conspiracy theory. Like, just look at the hard facts. Certain ones are good, certain ones are bad. Everything's like that. But whenever you are trying to sell a product through fear, like if you're a blood work company and you go, everyone's dying, buy my blood work. Like it's that fear that sells. So it's kind of the same thing, at least that I think that's going on. But again, I'm a very positive, optimistic person. So I like to think that that's not the true intentions of most, but obviously of some, because that's just reality.
Yeah. I mean, fear is the number one marketing tactic for all.
Right? Yeah.
Not just pharma, but everybody.
Yeah, buy my Lilo and Stitch shirt. I'm going to beat you up.
Well, yeah. If you don't do my program, you're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
You know, that's just kind of what it is.
Every other coach doesn't know what they're doing. Only I know.
Yeah.
That happens all the time, you know?
I'm sure there are some parents kind of listening to this right now going, yeah, I can see that maybe in my own kid or their children that they would play school with or whatever it might be, especially in those younger populations when they're exposed to those screens for such long periods of time and maybe there are architectural changes taking place. Is that reversible? Do you see success with like changing daily habits and seeing their behavior change? And then also, is the same true of adults? Like, how much have you seen in terms of like behavior shift and mood when people do these types of things?
Unless if your brain is splattered across the ground and you're dead, there's always a chance for change. Like, obviously, the younger your brain is, the more plastic you are because you have more functional mitochondria, you have less overall damage. Like, you're healthier when you're younger. Everyone knows that. You don't have to debate that. As you get older, you accumulate more, so it's more damage to clean up. But all of it's reversible with basic little habits. It's like with the kids, it's kind of like training. We're doing the hard stuff usually tends to work. And the hard stuff with kids is after you've had that long, hard work day, you come home, don't throw them in front of a TV for 3 hours. Like, spend time playing with them. And you're usually tired. As a parent, you had a long work day. Some days you just don't want to do that. But on top of just the bonding experience, it's getting them away from the screens. And again, screens aren't bad. We watch TV all the time, but it's in moderation.
You know what works? Consistency, hard training, and the right fuel. My friend, John Meadows, built Granite with that exact mindset. He didn't believe in gimmicks. He believed in products that deliver. 2 of my daily staples are creatine and Meadows Whey. The creatine helps me recover and stay focused, while the protein helps me meet my daily requirements. I will mix my protein in with my morning coffee and add it to my oatmeal. While training, I'll also toss in creatine with whatever I'm drinking. Creatine and whey are the same staples that John used, and I recommend them to anyone serious about their training. Supporting Granite isn't just about supplements, it's about continuing John's vision and legacy in this industry. Visit granitenutrition.com and use the code TABLETALK for 10% off your order. Train hard and support the legacy.
And of all my children, only one of them, my oldest daughter, Lila, she gets the most affected by blue light exposure. So at night, she just wears her blue light blocking glasses. And then she has no problems at all, no sleep problems. We joke because she's going to be the party girl. She's 6 years old, but she's like the ADHD, high energy. She's like me. She's like, go, 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 right? So we see that now, and we're doing things to make sure she doesn't have the problems I had to deal with as I was growing up that I had to fix myself. Sure. So something as simple as that, less screen time. And then if you are going to have that screen time, some basic glasses, you know?
Any other like big rocks that you would suggest there before we move on to the peptide side?
If I had, look, if we talk about like supplements for like,
no, even just daily habits, like things like the screen time and the technology that create a better environment for all these products to work and enhance their lives better.
It's all the hippie stuff. So you get outside, bare feet, sunlight. As basic as that sounds, no one likes to hear it. That photonic exchange from the sun that traverses our skin, touches our mitochondria, changes us at a cellular level, is so massively beneficial, not just for circadian habits, but pulling down excessive glucocorticoids, stressors. Like that environment of being out in nature changes you dramatically from the sun alone. And the sun has so many benefits, but we'll sidestep now to the grounding aspect. All grounding is donating electrons. So donating electrons is antioxidation. What does that sound like? That's a fruit, right? We eat our fruits to get electrons to be healthy. You can get the same thing from the earth. It's just that negative ion emission, whereas our technologies are a positive ion emission. So we're trying to balance that out with basic electrons. So me and my kids were outside barefoot in the grass for just 5 minutes a day, at least 5 minutes playing around, chasing each other, like teaching them also to get into fitness early in life is cool. So like we have med balls that will like run around and carry, or battle ropes, like whatever form of fitness and exercise is good. We go on walks all the time. I think that active lifestyle, the sun exposure and the grounding is so big, and it's free. Like everyone could be doing this, and you don't have to, like, you're not going to train them like yourself. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, make it fun, make a game out of it. And then you as a parent will get more in shape too. So it's win-win.
Yeah, for sure. Now, all of these compounds raise an interesting question that, maybe is pointless, but I think will go through a lot of people's heads, is especially if we're looking at this from like the performance or the meathead point of view, right? With all of these things that are coming out now that can come into play for sports performance and longevity, where does this fall now in the category of like someone claiming that I'm natty or I'm not natty or I'm enhanced? Like, where do you think people are going to be when all of these compounds are coming out and we're talking about like drug tested competitions and stuff like that? Is that almost going to become like a pointless kind of label or thought process, do you think?
I think so, because like, I'm just going to say this because whatever, like ever since 2020, if you had COVID or the vaccine, that was the widest spread case of genetic doping, because our human race was on one track and we made a hard right turn because of that event. You could go conspiracy theory, whatever you want, doesn't matter, but everyone changed since then. So our genome is vastly different just from 2020. So to me, I hear that and I go, it doesn't really matter who you are anymore. There's going to be some support in some way, because men are having low testosterone symptoms in their 20s, females in their 30s. So whether it's an over-the-counter supplement or full-blown HRT, that's going to come in just for quality of life, not even talking about performance enhancement. So to me, I think it's kind of a arbitrary argument. It's kind of like take care of yourself, take care of your health first, and then if you want to drive performance further than that, go crazy. But yeah, with all these advancements, like I know a lot of natural bodybuilders that there's carnitine in place, there's Dada, there's things that aren't banned that they're taking that still an injectable compound. So where do you draw the line? And I think that's more of like a moral debate. Like some people like to hold themselves to a higher moral standard and say, I don't have to do that. More than fine, you do you, I don't care. But I think it's just kind of arbitrary. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, sure.
Everyone at some point, whether you're 25 years old now going for the biggest squat of your life, or if you're 85 years old, eventually you're going to be taking some baby aspirin, or you're going to be taking some kind of TRT, or there's going to be some medication or supplement in play. And I don't see why you should turn a blind eye. We don't want to be like Western medicine, and I don't have anything against doctors or clinics, but we don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive. We want to be prophylactic with our health, just like our performance.
Do you think the fact that peptides and similar products don't have that stigmatized label that, testosterone or anything that would fall under the umbrella of PED, whatever, the fact that they don't have that at least yet actually means that potentially then they have the potential for much greater impact? Because like saying someone they need TRT and testosterone, there's going to be some kickback from some populations, but saying to someone like, okay, maybe don't worry about testosterone, but L-carnitine, tesamorelin, I'm sure there's a huge list you could put there. Probably being able to convince them they could do that might be a much easier task.
And that's exactly right. The stigma hasn't been there yet. And it's also kind of gone too mainstream, where I work with a lot of celebrities, A-list people, that they're starting their own supplement, like peptide companies. Once those kind of hit the markets, they're kind of too big. The governmental bodies can't do anything against them because they have more money than them. So to me, I think it's already gone too far, and I don't think there can be stigmas against them just because.
When you say there already is a stigma against them, considering most people are going to say, well, that doesn't do shit. I tried the BP-157, it didn't do anything. It's as most of the people that we talk to on the podcast, when we go down this rabbit hole, there is a stigma that I would say is against it, but not in the same context to which Tom's talking about, but in a context that the athletes are going to be surrounded with.
Okay, I got you.
You get what I'm saying? Because they're going to ask their coach or their whoever they train with and say, I tried that shit and it didn't work. Then you find out that they did try L-carnitine or whatever it was, and they took 3 doses and then just didn't want to deal with it after that.
So from that side of stigmatism, I think it's coming down to education.
Yes.
That's why these podcasts are awesome. Because if you take the BPC-157 example, if you look at traditional protocols out there, I've made up thousands of protocols because it varies based on the person and the problem. So some people go with the 500 micrograms daily. Other people need a full 5 milligram vial at one time for multiple days on end. So the dosage range is everywhere, not just on how the person metabolizes it, but also what the goal is. Are you using it? So like, we're going to go into this example because it's awesome. I don't think athletes know this. Heat shock protein 90, right? So we have our androgens. Androgen receptors are floating around. We have a ligand, being testosterone. Testosterone will bind to your androgen receptor. Heat shock protein 90 keeps it open till it binds. It'll kick off. It'll pull in through channels of the nucleus. It'll then cause genomic change that drives transcription, translation, new protein, right? You can increase heat shock protein 90 expression with BPC-157. So it keeps your androgen receptor open, so you have a better binding affinity and constant of your testosterone to come in and bind. This could be blasting, cruising, doesn't matter. It's improving the way your body uses androgens. So a lot of people that do layer in BPC for long enough periods of time, whether it's a dose problem or a duration problem, they'll start to notice all of a sudden they get more action out of their traditional androgen stack. So I think usually the education is going to come in with that. It's not following that there's 2 protocols out there and only those work. It could be a duration problem or a dosage problem. So I think once that kind of gets a little bit more out there, people start experimenting more kind of like they do with their androgens, then they'll start to realize, oh, there's a great application here.
Well, I think it's education, ignorance and education, right? So kind of like both of those fall into place, because if you take the BP-157, you ask most people, there's case use. You get hurt, you have an injury, you take it.
Yep.
And they're outside of that, they're not thinking of the second order, third order, fourth order, or what you just said.
Yeah.
That may not actually help with that, the injury, if it's acute or whatever, it could and would. But that's not the only reason.
Yeah.
Right? Because you'll get the questions, and I know he gets them. What peptide do I take for X?
Yeah.
Right? And the answer to that could be 8 different ones.
Yep.
So there's that where that education falls in. But I think that's also where the ignorance comes in, because maybe they're taking this because of that, but it didn't help with that. But it did all these other things that they're not aware.
And that's exactly right. And that's where I think, going back to education really helps, because if you know BPC-157 does 25 things and you take it and your bicep doesn't heal, but everything else grows faster, or it can actually modulate dopamine transmission in the brain. You can actually increase or downregulate it. So you can actually get depression from BPC. Very small minority of people. Majority of people use that as a nootropic-based aid as well. You do it intranasal to have more volition and neurological focus in that moment from the dopamine flux.
Yes. Well, not a peptide. A great example of this would be creatine, right?
Yes.
So for how many years now was it just for muscle building? But now it's nootropic.
Yeah.
It was always nootropic. You know what I'm saying? They didn't change the creatine.
Yeah.
For that effect.
Yep.
So that's a great example of kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah. And even like the doses, because doses of creatine was what? You read the study, only 5 grams, only 10 grams. Above that, you're wasted, all that stuff. Like I was the crazy guy bringing creatine to the Olympics, dosing upwards of like 50 grams, 100 grams, 150, depending on the person. These are different athletes. No one like that, like us, metabolizes creatine like that. But 20 grams, 25, working your creatine up to a dose to where you feel your best and don't get any kind of GI distress, it could be amazing. You have any kind of sleep traveling problem, you have the fireman we were talking about beforehand where it doesn't get a lot of sleep, you could pull down neuroinflammation dramatically with just your creatine first thing upon waking. So like you said, there's so many uses. It's just how people are viewing them and talking about them.
With the creatine example there, is there any reason someone wouldn't scale up their usage? Obviously, creatine is one that most people have got their head around now. They're pretty happy to take, right? So, and it's readily available, quite cheap. So is there any reason why someone wouldn't push it up?
So the first problem you run into is GI distress. You can either change the form or just pull it down 5 grams from there and stay there. Like I can take upwards of, now my stomach's changed over the years, but I'm right around 20 grams, 25 grams a day. That's what I have in here. This is my intro workout shake because I just burned through so much acetylcholine, ketones, everything when we talk, right? But the creatine's in there also pulled out neuroinflammation because I was excited the whole drive here. 3.5 hour drive, so I wanted to pull that down so I don't speak too fast and just get ahead of myself because I get too excited, right? But once you have the GI problems, then you pull it back down. Other than that, though, unless if you have like a CKD, so like a renal problem, like an actual kidney problem, that's going to cause more filtration problems. But if there's no CKD in play, your EGFR is like 70 plus, it's not going to cause any harm to kidneys or anything like that. So other than those 2 problems, not really. You might have, because everyone's not going to respond amazing to everything. That's just part of hypo and hypermetabolizers and responders. Someone doesn't respond well and they get GI distress at 2 grams or 5 grams. Okay, not your compound, not your supplement, move on to the next thing. But most people can get away with at least 10 to 20 grams.
Sure. So we've mentioned BPC already a couple of times. So let's go down the healing peptide route. And trying to put these in categories was difficult because, as you said, like BPC is a healing peptide, but it's also anabolic if you use it for long, all this stuff, right? But the next one most people would then go to is TB-500. They're very often combined in products, which I think is cool. Why would someone pick one over the other? Or is it a case if you would never pick one over the other, it would always be both? Like what is TB-500 bringing to the table that means it's benefit on top of that?
So, like we said, primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary action. So first, second, third, fourth order, right? The first thing that I see TB-500 being amazing at is it's the only peptide out there to turn on that neonatal gene expression. So again, getting your genes, getting your cells to act like they did whenever you had no damage as a baby neonatal, right? That's the biggest reason. But if you think about that, that affects every system. So you could literally use it to heal neurological tissue. Like if you have a stroke, the first thing you should do before you even get into the actual ambulance is take a big shot of TB-500. I've had a lot of people at that age range that are susceptible to having a stroke. They have that on hand. And if they do that, they will leave the hospital with zero signs of an actual stroke. That's how fast it actually works. So tons of different case uses, but TB-500 for the neurological side of things is amazing. It also plays off the actin side of things. So all your muscular tissues spilling over into your cartilage-based fibroblast tissues will also be recovered. So if there's a blown out elbow, if there's a blown out knee, if there's a torn bicep, torn quad, BPC and TB can be used in conjunction to drive those factors. TB-500 for me, if we had to compare the two, I see in practice TB-500 being slightly better for neurological changes and being slightly better for cardiac changes. But you can also argue the spillover effect from the BPC as well. So there is a lot of crosstalk, cross-interaction, but mainly if we're looking at them being fairly separate, I see TB-500 as being more of that neonatal gene expressor, where BPC-157 doesn't have that capacity. But it drives the actin side of things that much harder.
Sure.
So it drives the tissue healing better, whereas TB drives more of like the genetic side of things harder. But they still it's called crosstalk. Well, crosstalk, cross-interact, and still heal similar systems.
Sure. So you've already mentioned how BPC can have these longer-term epigenetic effects. If TB-500 is having those neonatal effects as well, is there an even bigger argument for TB-500 to potentially be used long-term by individuals for that purpose?
1000%. Yeah. Because if you're just looking at trying to heal your system as a whole, in our society today, whether it's worrying about bills, fighting with your wife, overtraining in the gym, whatever, stressors are accumulating. We want some stress in life. Too much, too little causes problems. So to me, it's like that background therapeutic aid. So I have a lot of people who just like, they don't want to pin themselves every day. So you could do a bolus like longevity approach, TB-500, 1 or 2 days per month, a full vial each time. So at least every month you're having that big whack of healing at the epigenetic level, right? Do the same thing with BPC. You don't have to inject as frequently. If you have the torn bicep, or something acutely needed, then that's more of a frequency problem where you have to bring that in daily. So you could bring them in a couple different ways, but I think both of them, because you almost can't take too much if you don't get any negative side effects, and most people don't. So it can also be a background therapeutic aid for pretty long periods of time. I have a lot of the best powerlifters and strongmen where they're on 500 micrograms of both long term. They've been on that for a year, 2 years, and they're better than ever. They don't have any knee or hip problems anymore. And if you take too much, it just doesn't have any extra healing.
Now, if they're on for a long term, you know, as you kind of stated earlier, it's going to change the system. Then why would they have to be on it long term once the system's changed? Why do they need to stay on it?
Because every day you're damaging your body.
Okay.
So then you're recreating, and once you get back to baseline, no one's going to stop training. Yeah. No one's going to pull back to train 2 days per week. So you're going to have another stress.
And you're still exposed to all the other elements.
Exactly. All the other elements. Then taxes hit, and then you're neurologically stressed, and there's always something new.
Yeah. Now, most people are going to know BPC-157, TB-500, but those are not the only healing peptides out there, right? So what else are you utilizing with people specifically for healing now? If we're looking at like acute, torn bicep, whatever, what else are you bringing into play, and what are they offering that those don't? When might someone favor GHK-Cu over BPC or whatever it might be, for example?
GHK-Cu is awesome. Two things it does. Again, does a lot of things, but its ability to pull in stem cells to the area. So if we look at red bone marrow, which dumps stem cells out in circulation, if they're not used, they come back in. So it's a CXCR STF, basically translocation process. We're trying to blunt that process so we keep more stem cells in circulation. So GHK will pull stem cells out of red bone marrow, and if you apply it locally, we'll pull them into that area. And the stem cells will spit out exosomes, drive healing, all that cool stuff. So number one, drastic healing from GHK from driving more stem cells. So if you're getting stem cell or exosome therapy, probably precede that with GHK, right? Makes sense. GHK-Cu, by the way, we want the copper component in there. Second one, if you look at telomeres, so the things that basically shorten as you age, right? They have a parent strand and then a new strand of DNA. There's a 3' overhang on the end. As we age, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter. GHK combines with near-infrared exposure to actually add length to those telomeres, so the telomerase-based enzyme, which has a TERK and TERT component, which doesn't really matter for this conversation, but it'll add length to your telomeres. So you're not just healing the problem with stem cells, you're also adding length to your telomeres, so your whole longevity equation is also being solved at the same time.
So again, that sounds like yet another one that in theory, maybe you need to go out and make some triple combination product out there that could be brought in daily or like once per month forever for all that background stressor, but also then for more longevity from a genetic standpoint, I suppose.
Yeah, the whole glow blend, it's awesome, right? And people would make the argument that you get copper toxicity from GHK, but I don't think in all my cases over 13 years, I think there's maybe been 2, maybe 3 cases of copper toxicity from GHK. It's usually a dosage problem, but even at that, we're using up those copper molecules pretty rapidly with the immune system, with different receptor interactions. Like copper is so important to our bodies. You know, if you look at the whole grounding effects and all that kind of fun stuff, there's a reason why copper is present. So most people can't overdo it on the GHK, the copper portion, to run into an actual problem.
If someone were to be in that 1 in 10,000 case, of getting copper toxicity, what would happen? What would they see?
You usually start seeing some thyroid-based problems. Hair starts to kind of get thinner. You start to have some like lethargy-based problems. Usually gut disturbances kind of kicks up. You kind of get hit with a little bit of everything.
Sure.
So in that scenario, you just stop taking the copper or you push up your zinc, because zinc, copper bounce each other out.
Work against it. So that's going to be a case of you stop tomorrow and within a couple of days.
Yep, pretty much.
So what about, you know, there are pricier ones out there like SS31, I think, is it Fox 404 or what?
FOX4 DRI.
Yeah, so what, you know, some people might look at those, and I know that especially the Fox one is quite popular with, like, should we say, high-performing professionals and things like that. When would someone look at those and be like, that's worth the extra cost in my circumstance? Like, what are the circumstances where you'd say, like, look, this is triple the price, but I think you should be trying these instead of BPC or GHK-Cu?
So FOXO4, Detro, and Verso, that specific compound is mainly a senescent cell player. So as you kind of accumulate injuries, age, you just accumulate basically dysfunctional cells. Now, in biology, again, we don't want extremes. Some senescent cells are good for adaptation. Too much causes problems. If you were to go into a stem cell treatment, for example, and you didn't clear out senescent cells, there's a potential for these blank cells to come in and copy that damaged genetic information. So in that scenario, FOXO4 DRI can clear out those senescent cells, actually azithromycin as well. Both those compounds can clear out senescent cells extremely rapidly. But again, we don't want to deplete them completely because it's part of the adaptation process. So you're looking at the chemical signaling strength of these compounds. So FOXO4, things like that are so high on the chemical signaling threshold concept side of things, that to me should be used infrequently, because you don't need that much clearance or else it does cause problems. So that would be done once a quarter, a couple times a year before stem cell therapies, like, you know, specific case scenarios. Whereas like the daily senescent cell clearance players like the physitins, the autophagy, mitophagy based players like urothinate and spermidine, those can kind of be in the background daily because it's capped at physiological limits. So you can't overdrive those processes too well.
Sure. So like that FOXO4 is probably not one that most people are probably ever going to need to use, do you think?
Honestly, probably not. I mean, a lot of people, again, unless if you're doing the therapies, I would bring it in that scenario, but it depends on where you're at. Usually the more dysfunctional you are, the more useful it'll be, but it's still more of an infrequent kind of an acute player.
Sure. Now, ones that you've talked about quite a lot, which I find others don't, is the thymus gland peptides, because thymus gland doesn't get a lot of love, but it actually plays a much bigger role in a lot of things than we think. And even if we're looking at this from a meathead training perspective, you need your immune system for a lot of things, for recovering from training and whatever else, even just keeping you healthy. So do you think those are underutilized, and how should people be utilizing those if their role is like, I want to stay either just healthy in the general sense or perform at a high level for longer?
So I just healed a zebra shark's thymus gland, actually, because there's an immune problem with one of the zoos I consult with. So just so everyone, I always say that so people know how important the thymus gland is. There's differences between, obviously, humans and thymic glands of sharks. But if we look at long-term immunity, we look at the thymus gland being in the middle of our chest, right? That produces all of our immune factors. You have these different peptides that cause different chain expressions at different points in the thymus gland. So thymogen alpha-1 is an oral bioregulator that works preglandularly. So it convinces your thymus gland to release more factors, right? So that's more of a player, at least that I see, as a long-term agent. So I bring that in personally every Saturday and Sunday because I want my long-term immune system to be topped off. I don't need that every day because it's a long-term player, right? Thymolin, which is a peptide, injectable. You can also have oral and bioships as well. That's the actual thymic gland player itself working at the gland to then drive and donate more immune factors to the system. So that would be something if you are about to go through a traveling event or you know something's about to come up and you have like a moderate term need for it, that's when we bring in thymolin. Thymosin alpha-1 is postglandular. That works right now. So I took 5 milligrams of that before I came out here today because Alex isn't getting sick. I don't have time to be sick. So that works right now. Or if you know you're going to Thanksgiving, everyone's going to be coughing on each other, whatever, that's when you'd bring it in kind of prophylactically because that's working so acutely. And there's other ones out there, but those are the main ones we're looking at to drive immunity, whether you need it now in like a week or two or kind of over the next couple months, years. And for the athletes out there, once you start overtraining, once you start driving up so much myotrauma, the first thing that goes to your immune system And it could present itself as a sickness, as training-induced fatigue, as brain fog, or you could actually tear a muscle if your immune system's not functioning properly. So the more you can fortify your immune system. That's why, like, back in the day with powerlifting, like, we would IV a ton of vitamin C because it would direct antioxidants to the location of damage that well. Same thing. If you can drive more immunity long-term, especially for the athletes out there, you're only going to perform better because you'll be able to train more frequently and harder because you can recover faster.
Sure. And, you know, for the individuals there, looking at this as like a longevity player, thymus gland starts to degrade at what, like 30 years old, something like that?
Between 30 and 50, our body starts to slowly deteriorate, right? So our thymus gland starts to calcify, our red bone marrow starts to stop dumping out stem cells in circulation, it starts to slowly come down. We produce less superoxide dismutase to go into mitochondria and drive more healing. Like plasmalogen levels tank, fatty 15 levels, like everything starts to tank the older you get.
Are you feeling like you're not the man you're supposed to be? Low confidence, negative thoughts polluting your brain? That's me. I get it. I've been dealing with messed up hormones most of my life. A couple years I hooked up with Merrick Health, and it was one of the best things that I ever did. They're a health optimization platform that does advanced lab works and goes deeper than probably what you've ever seen before. What you'll get with Merrick Health is they have guided optimization and the self-service diagnosis. I personally have been using the guided optimization for the whole time I've been with him. Dry is my health coach. He does an amazing job. The second route that they have is the self-service diagnostics. This is just a DIY with your own health journey. You just head over to Merrick Health, pick the panel, and they'll send you the report. You just kind of go from there. Either way, I highly recommend them, and you can get 10% off right now. Just head over to merrickhealth.com and use the code TABLETALK at checkout.
That's why everyone says, oh, I hit 30 and I woke up the next day and I had a bad back. It's because, like, literally your rate depends on the person, but anywhere in that range, 30 to 50, usually when our body stops producing these factors.
Sure.
Going back to the strength athletes that you were talking about, how many times have we all heard, if it's I'm closer to the bodybuilding and powerlifting realm, I always get sick 5 or 6 weeks out. You know, I always get the flu 5 or 6 weeks out, or I always get this cold 5 or 6 weeks out. So it kind of supports what you're talking about.
Exactly.
This can be put in there to protect at that time.
That's exactly right. So the thymic players come in at the last 8 weeks of almost everyone's contest prep. Prophylactically, you could bring in the healing peptides in peak week on competition day. So as you have those micro traumas and tears, they're rapidly recovering and repleting themselves. You can also have in those final weeks, we'll get to the nootropic side of things, the cerebrolysines. So after you had your hardest session of the week, whether it was the bodybuilder or powerlifter, it doesn't matter. Your brain, you can reset it and recover it. So it feels like you didn't even have a workout in the first place. And that spills over into the nootropic conversation, but we'll get to that.
So you think for those strength athletes, a lot of these are actually, we want to be using them proactively rather than reactively.
Definitely. Yeah, because I see the prophylactic movement being better because we know what's going to happen if we don't do anything. Everyone's getting sick the final 4 weeks. Everyone feels like trash going into a meet or most bodybuilding competitions.
Yeah, like, reactive means you fucked up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Like that's in the term, right?
Yeah, sure. But so, you know, everyone is planning out their training percentages and stuff like months in advance, and their diet and probably their PED cycles if they're using them. So, you know, for you personally, would you, if someone is doing that, you'd rather see like a peptide protocol put in there proactively, being like, look, this is where your training is going to be the most stressful in this kind of way. Maybe it's hypertrophy block. This is where your training is going to be more stressful neurologically. And there are individual kind of protocols they can bring in proactively to support that.
Exactly. And again, this whole conversation is not about deleting everything that we've done to get us here at this point in history, right? Like everyone knows their androgen protocol, what to take, how to do it, that stays the same. We're talking about layering this on top of it to bring more finesse and sophistication to the program so that we don't get sick.
Actually, in theory and actually in reality, their protocol, their androgen protocol could decrease and work better.
Yeah.
Because what they typically end up doing is just adding shit on top of shit on top of shit because it's not getting the same effect as what they want. Yeah. So the answer to that is take more. Right. But that really isn't helping them in any way. It's actually creating more trauma and more damage.
Exactly.
To where if the compounds could work as they're supposed to work, you know, then they would need less of that to get a higher yield.
So
Right.
yeah, before we started recording the podcast, we talked about hyper and hypo responders. So the hyper responder that needs less total androgens is going to probably need less total peptides because they respond so well to such a low dose. Now it could be hyper responders for the positive or the negative, so you have to leave that out. But it's the hypo responders, the peoples that do have to take more androgens than they probably should. They benefit more from this because you could still overcome that overall health disruption, and then you don't have to push it so hard. And then, like you said, your dosage, your load of androgens actually comes down.
In that specific context, we're looking at, say, a high-performing strength athlete who is using anabolics. Or, I guess, the same question is going to apply to, say, someone who's on TRT.
Yep.
Right? What peptides do you see coming in to play that role of either making them get more out of what they're taking anyway, or perhaps allow them to get more benefit from even taking less? What you've already mentioned BPC-157 and that effect at the androgen receptor. Are there other things that people can bring in long-term to help them milk more out of whatever it is that they're taking?
The whole somatropic category, so somatropic, more growth hormone related, whether it's exogenous growth hormone or growth hormone peptides, has so much validity. So not only are we bridging the enzymatic and mitochondrial gap that comes from pushing androgens, even TRT higher, because we have to accommodate for those, right? But also regrowing your thymus gland. Growth hormone does that. Growth hormone peptides does that. Not as well, but still pretty decently well. On top of driving sleep architecture. So you want to get more deep, more REM to drive more lymphatic system, clean your brain at night. You're going to be pushing something on the growth hormone axis. So normally in this kind of scenario with athletes specifically, we'd probably venture down the growth hormone conversation first and kind of discern, okay, do they need the chemical pressure of an exogenous hormone of 22 kilodalton variety, or can we get away with just the peptides? And where do they stand? What do they want to do? All that stuff. But that'd probably be the next layer to go through.
Sure. So when we're looking at that, let's go down that growth hormone category. That obviously the biggest kickback you're going to get from a lot of people is that's expensive, right? So people usually will look at that and think, what am I going to get out of it? And when they don't get a response instantly, it's not like taking Tren or whatever, and 2 weeks later it's like, oh, my lifts are all up, or I look different, or whatever it might be. What are we looking to gain long term from either exogenous growth hormone or those growth hormone peptides in the context of the sports performance or getting more from those androgens?
I don't want to say everything, but I kind of have to say everything. So it's weird to talk about with somatropic compounds as a whole, because growth hormone, if you look at the mitochondria, it improves their number. So biogenesis, it improves the integrity, it improves how they communicate with each other. Everything that mitochondria do, growth hormone improves, on top of improving how the thymus gland functions. So now if you have a systemic fatigue meter and you train, so you're 100% normal at rest, you train, there's down to 80%. You take too many inches, down to 50%. You fight with thrive, 25%. You keep going down. Growth hormone takes care of the mitochondrial cleanup to put you back up to 120%. So you don't notice it right away. It's not like the next day you wake up, you're superhuman. But all of a sudden, you can get a couple more reps. You sleep that much better. Your hair and skin quality improves. You can push that much more load. It's all those little things you have to keep an eye on. And so even though these work non-genomically, so right now, so the moment you take a growth hormone compound, no matter what it is, it's working the second you apply it. You only notice those changes over time. Because you're not going to notice one good night of sleep, but you're going to notice a couple of weeks of good nights of sleep. And then same thing with the hair growth, maybe not for you guys, but for me, I notice it, the skin, the recovery, like you start to see all these little metrics picking up. So even though it's not the huge game changer overnight, like a lot of traditional androgens, it's that background player enzymatically that really starts to pay off long-term. Because then your joints stop hurting as much. Little anecdote as well. I've had about 3,000 positive conceptions, so in the fertility world. And for myself, I cannot get my wife pregnant without growth hormone. As low as half an IU or 1 IU, and my sperm's mitochondria fires up, sodium potassium pumps get fixed, and we get pregnant within a couple weeks. So if you look at all areas, if biology is so dependent upon procreation, and you see your sperm cells being that receptive to growth hormone, kind of leads you to believe that's going to be like that in every system in the body, which is how it kind of works.
So in that scenario, before we went on air, you mentioned a certain athlete not doing too well in a drug test and getting done for testosterone, and you made the kind of passing comment like, that's 30-year-old technology, that shouldn't be happening, right? So in this circumstance, if we're looking at, we have exogenous growth hormone over here, and we have those growth hormone peptides over here, like testosterone, what is the distinguishing factor? Like, why are they different? Why would someone pick one over the other? And then even within those peptides, someone, if they go to a TRT clinic, there's going to be CJC or whatever else put out them. What is going to make them go, actually, this is the right one for me?
Let me clarify that comment real quick. Yeah, that is a specific professional athlete. And over there, it was used for recovery purposes. And it's very easily detectable. So there's 10 1,000 other things we could have used and I said to use that weren't used to drive recovery. So that was, done wrong. We'll leave it at that. So moving on to the growth hormone conversation, exogenous growth hormone. Get it in your vial. It's a 22 kilodalton variety. Our body releases a 22 kilodalton, a 20 kilodalton, 17s, all these oligomers, heterodimers, homodimers, subfractions, goes on and on. Our liver will spit out IGF-1, as well as about 1,000 other growth factors, right? So we can only measure IGF-1 and serum growth hormone, so you never really know if the test is that efficient. You're looking more at getting third-party testing. But that 22 kilodalton growth hormone we traditionally get, so exogenous growth hormone, will drive every single aspect of growth hormone action to the next level. So even half an IU is pretty strong, depending on the community you're at. Usually we say longevity doses are like 2 to 3 IUs or less. Athletic doses are generally 4 to 10, maybe 4 plus. We'll say 4 plus depending on the person, right? We are going to be getting essentially driving on every single recovery system. So myological, so muscle recovery, connective tissue-based recovery, it drives oligodendrogenesis. So it'll start driving oligodendrogenesis creation in the brain. So the oligodendrocytes can actually communicate. So communication systems go up. So as you're learning how to squat and how to bench, your neurons communicate faster. So you're learning how to produce that lift faster. Everything improves on growth hormone exogenously. Problem is, if you are a poor responder or take too much, edema, blood pressure, and you start having just some of the negative side effects with glucose metabolism. That can usually be fixed with just basically taking less. So no one ever talks about the half an IU, because it's not that like sexy to talk about, but even half an IU can be dramatic. In the athletic world, you're probably not going to be at half an IU. You're probably going to be going up, but the same principle holds. Start low and build up. So if there's negative side effects, you know what to do. If you are someone who's a poor responder, doesn't want to go down the growth hormone route, doesn't have the money, growth hormone peptides as a whole come in. So there's a whole conversation here with growth hormone releasing hormones, peptides, and then the enzymatic players like MK677. So we have the releasing peptides and the releasing hormones. So we get an increase in the actual pulse and then the duration of the pulse, right? So this is where like the ipamorelins, the hexarelins come in, then also the testosterone and sermorelins. CJC 1295, we usually see that paired with ipamorelin. So again, you can create the pulse and elongate that pulse. That was, if anyone was big in the forums back on the day, that be true. He was like the godfather of all growth hormone peptides. He had all the original research. He was the go-to guy. That was the first person who ever talked about this stuff, right? I remember being a kid, like I'm researching, like, oh my God, this guy knows everything. So credit in the world goes to him. We look at these growth hormone peptides not having the same chemical potential as exogenous growth hormone, but more chemical signaling is not always better, because more chemical signaling can also mean more negative side effects. So you can pick and choose between the two, but you can also take those exogenous growth hormone peptides to drive the reception process of how growth hormone binds to its receptor. So you could literally take your peptide 60 minutes before your exogenous growth hormone, it'll potentiate how it binds and give you a better signal. So instead of taking 3 IUs, you only take 1 IU.
So what is the truth with the growth hormone when it would come to one of the counters to that would be the hypertrophy of the heart, growth of cancer cells, and all those other things?
Yep. So in the cancer world, you don't spontaneously grow a tumor. If a tumor is there, it will proliferate it because it drives global proliferation, but it's not going to cause that inflammation oxidation to actually cause a tumor to be there in the first place. So if you have cancer, don't take it. If your mom, dad...
Well, they wouldn't know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That is a good argument.
And that's kind of where the heart would fall into there as well, is there's no way to measure if your heart's getting bigger or not.
So with the heart conversation, no matter what, you're going to have enlargement from the traditional weight training, because it has to be that way mechanically, or else your heart would just explode when you go to squat, right? Yeah. And there's an acceptable amount of millimeter change, usually upwards of talk about 15 millimeters, something like that. Pretty standard for like left ventricular hypertrophy. You have the marathon runners with more of the right ventricular hypertrophy, so you do have this range. But this is the inherent risk of taking these compounds, right? So you try and do it as intelligently as possible. So to me, on the cancer side of things, if your mom didn't have it, dad didn't have it, no real signs, take it with context, because if you're taking growth hormone, you're probably also doing things that your parents and grandparents didn't do from a healthy lifestyle aspect.
Now, how would the dose dependency factor into that?
In terms of how much it would proliferate?
Well, I mean, if it's half an IU compared to 10 IUs, it's going to play more role, right? And I don't want to say that the half IU, because everybody's going to be a little different, may not impact these things, because it's not a lot.
And that's why we say like the longevity doses of your IUs, because if you have proliferation of a tumor, for example, your body's still working. As long as it shuts off and lets that thing grow, it doesn't want to grow. So it's going to slowly cleave it and metabolize and get it out because it doesn't want it there. But if you're doing 10 IUs plus, it can grow so fast your immune system can't keep up with it. Yeah. Because remember, growth hormone also drives up the whole natural killer cell cycle and effect as a whole. So growth hormone, another thing I took this one because I don't want to get sick, can drive up your immune system in and of itself as well. So that's where doses definitely does play a role. And then how you respond to that definitely plays a role as well.
Yeah.
True. So for someone who is a poor responder to exogenous growth hormone, do those growth hormone peptides basically offer an alternative that in generally are going to have less side effects just because there's less acute effect?
And that's exactly right, because they're working through different enzymatic means. So they're causing that hypothalamic, they're causing that neurological release of growth hormone endogenously, whereas the exogenous is kind of replacement. It's not actually replacement, it's more blunting. You get blunting of somatropic axes for like a couple hours, that slowly starts to come up from there. But yeah, usually if you respond worse to one, you respond better to the other. But that also changes as you age. As you get older, it's actually the opposite, where the enzymatic equation gets so downregulated because of poor mitochondrial functioning, the growth hormone peptides work less well. So then you usually have to go with the exogenous growth.
Sure.
And again, depends on the person, but generally I've seen that happen with like my populations that's like 80, 90 years old. Like those people that are trying to drive the longevity train a little bit harder, they usually can't respond to growth hormone peptides. We need actually exogenous growth hormone.
Well, they come in with my meathead questions, right? Because we're good with those.
Yeah, meathead.
Is the growth hormone kind of like the TRT or the just say testosterone, to where we have all these, I call it fake testosterone agents, right? So what do you call it? Testosterone supplements, enhancers, whatever it is. As long as you're not being drug tested, just take the real fucking shit. It's probably better for you and it's going to work better. Where with the growth hormone, it would be just take the real shit unless you're going to get drug tested, because all the other things aren't going to work as good. Would that be true with the, I know it's true with the testosterone, right? I'll debate that to death and don't even have the context and base to be able to have a good debate on it, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Is that true with that growth hormone? Because if these regulators, can they be better? You know what I'm saying?
I got you.
Are they on even ground, or is it just like, just take the real shit and don't even bother with the other stuff?
60% of the time, exogenous growth hormone is going to be superior.
But it's not like it's not like the test.
Exactly. If you have low TRT, if you have low testosterone, rather, Shilajit, Tungat Ali, certain things are just not going to push the pressure enough. So you need exogenous testosterone.
Yeah.
But growth hormone's interesting. It's more dependent upon how someone enzymatically cleaves and metabolizes it. So it's not always like, in general, like the majority respond better to exogenous growth hormone even at a lower dosage, but there's still that 40% where sometimes they just only get negative responses even at the lowest dose, and they take the peptides and they just flourish. So it's more complicated to cleave those versus the androgen, which is, I don't want to say dumb, but it does its job extremely well. It's more efficient.
Interesting. Because that opens the door, right? So, because one's harder to get than the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, well, we'll just stop with that.
But you did also there mention that you could use something like tesamorelin to actually make exogenous growth hormone work better.
Exactly. So if you want the effects of growth hormone in the athletic world, but you can't take, say, 3 IUs, drop it down to 1 IU or 1.5 IUs, whatever you think you can respond to, and increase its efficacy on the positive side effect profile with taking a peptide beforehand. So it takes about 60-ish minutes, maybe 90. We just say 60 minutes because it's easier that way to drive the reception process at the growth hormone receptor itself.
So if someone is a poor responder, like they get the numb fingers and hands, whatever else, would that be a way of them getting the benefits of 4 IUs that they can't take without experiencing that from 2?
Yep, exactly.
Perfect. So
and again, the numbers aren't exactly like that, but it's whatever arbitrary number it is. You're going to be getting more out of less and not the negative side of things.
Okay, since you opened this door,
go.
Of the numb hand thing, because I've dealt with that before in the past when I used growth hormone. I don't want to take some shit 90 minutes before I take the growth hormone. Like, how do you deal with the numb hands?
Lower the dose, lower body fat, lower fluid retention.
It was only 4 IU. Well, 4 IU. It wasn't a lot.
Okay.
Right. So, well, to some it would be a lot, right? I got to watch my words here. It was not a lot for me at that time.
Yes.
Let's just put it that way.
So being completely honest, in the athletic world, there's 10 IUs, 20 IUs, 30 IUs. Like the doses go crazy up depending on what athlete you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So it's all relative.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it didn't get more numb the higher the dose went. It just, but I wasn't able to work.
Yep.
Right. It's fucking annoying. And people would give me different protocols, like 5 on, 2 off, and all this other kind of shit. But it always took like 3 weeks to get it to come back to life. Then you're right back to this shit again. And So there's no like hack supplement to be able to take to fix that.
It's either lower the dose,
which is I didn't want to do.
Which you didn't want to do, or switch up to the peptides, which sounds
okay. That's where I was going. So
okay,
yeah. Now, the scenario you put, I'm just putting myself in this situation when I was using that. I don't know if I would have the compliance to take one thing and then wait 60 minutes to take the other thing.
I got you. Ready for this?
Yeah.
What do you do before bed? What's your nighttime routine?
Fucking take my supplements, put my CPAP on and go to bed.
You don't brush your teeth? You don't take a poop?
Well, sometimes. Not consistent enough to be like routine wise.
Okay. Well, then you're the oddball out because almost everyone I talk to, they have something they do before bed. Put the kids down, take the dogs out, whatever, put the house alarm on. Like
you anchor it is what you're saying.
Exactly. So you do your growth hormone peptide, then you do all of your nighttime tasks, and then you do your growth hormone. You don't have to stay hard fast to the 60 minutes. Could be 45, could be 90, but you have a range.
Could it be the growth that before bed and then the growth hormone in the morning? Or is that too long?
Technically, you would still get a decent response, but then you'd be driving more of the lipolysis, more beta-oxidative fat loss effects in the morning from the growth hormone versus more of the recovery, leogenesis at night. Depending on what effects you want. But you could do that for sure.
Yeah.
So
most people that are listening to this if they are using all, they would have no problem doing what I'm saying. I'm just being an asshole.
You're good.
You want to help the one person that won't do that.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time I was taking 14 different pins a day. So
you mentioned there having growth hormone in the morning is going to push lipolysis more, right? Which is an interesting comment because growth hormone, you said, has all these wonderful benefits that it's just about every system in the body, right? But according to what you're saying there is you can bias what it does based on its application. And I think we've all, anyone who's using growth hormone probably knows there's 1,000 different mythical protocols that supposedly all do wonderful things that maybe people don't see. So when we're trying to leverage it one way or the other, how is one doing that? Like if someone's over max anabolism over here, but maybe in a fat loss phase, competition prep, or even longevity, whatever over here, how does the application differ, even if the dosage overall is the same?
Do them all.
I mean, people do that. You can. And then you're basically mimicking acromegaly, where you're just dumping growth hormone all day. So usually the negative side effect profiles kick up, but you get pretty strong. So there's a time and a place for that. Like to me, nothing's wrong. It's what's that person's goal. Not everyone wants to live to be 200 years old. Some people only care about living to be 40 years old and then hitting that prime lift. But other people, they want to hit that prime lift and then they want to be able to live to be 80 or 90 or whatever. So all context dependent. But essentially look at the timing aspect. And remember with peptides, much more timing specific than androgens. Androgens, regardless of the ester, they're kind of idiot proof. And even with longer esters, depending on how you metabolize it, could be a daily application therapy of a longer ester. So there's a different conversation that we won't get into. Going back to the growth hormone side of things, before bed is generally the overall global driver, right? You're recovering soft tissue, muscular tissue, or neural tissue. It's driving a little bit of anabolism, a little bit of everything, right? Upon waking, whenever you're going to use it pre-exercise, for example, it's going to donate more lipase. Lipase is going to come into the adipocyte, the fat cell. It's going to cut off the little, fatty acid tails. Glycerol head's going to go somewhere else. Fatty acid tail's going to go into the bloodstream. Bloodstream goes into the mitochondria, oxidizes it off. So in that scenario, you could take growth hormone upon waking, pre-fasted cardio to get more fat loss per square second of exercise.
So this brings up an interesting question that just came to my head is, with all these things that we've already discussed and the ones that we're going to discuss, the nootropics will play a greater role here. If the person's training is on point, the recovery is on point, all these things are on point. So recovery does not have to be supplemented. It's good. It's all good. Then they would not need these. Well, what do you need extra recovery for, right? You could say, well, so they could train harder, but they're already eliciting the adaptations that they want to elicit, right? So then that timing can become this other variable that either they can just pull it out and save the money, or they can put it someplace else to get a second order effect to be the first order effect.
Yeah, exactly. So no one said you have to take these compounds daily. I'll have those people in that scenario where everything's perfect, but that one training session per week or that one day of work just tanks them.
Yes.
So you only take it on that day.
See, that should be the goal. That's what you're trying to lead into with the whole thing, right? The goal is all these training and all the other things should be as optimized as they possibly could.
Exactly.
Because this is going to be totally meathead, because what a waste of money to put into recovery, right? When you could put it in performance. You know what I'm saying? So if you're spending $500 a month just to recover, which you should be able to just manage your fucking training and sleep and food to be able to take care of that, then that $500 a month can go into the performance aspect. You know, which may mean that you need better recovery later, you know, so there'd be a phasic thing. And you get what I'm saying?
We're a hair's breadth away from test math, right?
Well, I think this is what a lot of at least the strength athletes are missing here, right? Because they just have this keep pouring more shit in the bucket approach, you know, with that whole thing. Because what I have seen is they'll use all this shit for recovery, and then their own natural recovery, they become dependent upon it, because then they let all the other shit slide. It's like, oh, I'm recovering good because of the growth hormone, because of the BP, because of all this other kind of stuff. So then instead of eating as clean as they normally would eat, not that it's 100%, but say it's 60%. Now it's 40%.
It gets worse.
Yes. So when that stuff would come out, then all of a sudden they're tanked.
It's not using it as a crutch. It's making sure the basics are there. So the proper training, the proper nutrition, proper sleep, proper stress management, the grounding, the water, the sun, like all the basic things that aren't that sexy should be done first and foremost. Then you layer on hormones, peptides, supplements. Like, to me, if the basics aren't there, I know everyone says it, but like I genuinely mean it, like they don't matter as much. It's the environment you're putting it into. Yeah, they can do great things by themselves if you don't even do anything. But imagine what they can do in an optimized environment. And if everyone's spending all this money anyway, don't you want to train smarter? Because smarter doesn't always mean more. Sometimes it means training less or training harder in a certain variety. Right?
Or be able to reallocate those funds to be able to feel like God when you train.
Exactly.
Because that's what we all love.
Save that money. Buy exosomes, have them in a nebulizer, so on competition day, in between meets, in between actual attempts, you can nebulize some exosomes, heal back to 100% for your second attempt, for your third attempt. You could do that with saving 2 months of growth hormone, about $1,000 for 10 billion exosomes.
So most people, there's going to be 4 words there that you just use that probably people don't understand. Right? So let's just dial that back a little bit. Nebulizing exosomes at a meet. This sounds really cool, right? So what does that involve? What does it do?
I get excited.
No, please.
So you can buy a mesh nebulizer off of Amazon for $40. It's a vibratory mesh nebulizer, so it's handheld. It's about this big. It has a little oxygen mask, so like a little cannula. Put it over your mask, and you can basically nebulize anything in there. So you turn it on, it shakes the particles, it disperses those particles. You can put peptides in there. You can put anything in there, really. This conversation is bringing in exosomes. Exosomes are essentially the byproduct of stem cells that drive direct cellular healing and repair. So if you can imagine like a cell floating throughout your body, I keep hitting that. And there's different etchings on the cell that says, hey, this is damaged, this one's not. It'll find the damaged cells, the damaged organelles, go in there and heal that. So the reason why this is important is because on competition day, unless if you tear a muscle, you're generally just expending so much acetylcholine, ketone bodies, glucose, and oxygen in the brain. So that's the reason why you miss your lift. It's usually not a myological physical problem. It's neurologically, you can't send enough neurons to contract the right fibers. So it's all coming back to neurochemistry. So you can nebulize those, get them through the nasal cavity, because that connects directly with the hippocampus and amygdala, so memory and emotion. So you can remember the perfect squat that you did in training, remember the perfect bench, remember the perfect deadlift, and recover in between attempts. So each attempt feels like your first attempt for the day. And 10 billion exosomes in one nebulizer would last you basically the entire meet. Because you can dilute it. It's usually 1 milliliter solution. Like that, even though it's $1,000, it'll last you that one day. But that's also the most important day of your entire prep. So why wouldn't you save some money for that?
Yeah, sure.
So that kind of explain things?
Yeah, for sure. But that's a long stretch from death metal and Sour Patch Kids, which is most people's kind of prep for the second lift or whatever, right?
And that works, though. That works sometimes.
Yeah. But so there's a lot, even let's just go down the meet day example since we're already there, right? What are some other players that you see coming in on things like competition days and test days that people don't think of that are actually quite low-hanging fruit that could get them to perform better?
Those prophylactic players, the healing-based peptides, usually during peak weekend, especially on competition day, because as we're looking at a muscle tear and how these like traumatic injuries happen during an event, during a meet, it's never like just all of a sudden it pops. It's these slow micro tears that happen beforehand or during. So it's not like the muscle just gives. I mean, in effect, it looks like that, but it's these small traumas. It's like, no, bam, something pops. So if we can literally recover as that's happening, you don't end up tearing a muscle. You don't end up blowing any kind of soft tissue articular cartilage out. So on competition meet morning, what I have a lot of people do is do a pretty big bolus of BPC-157, TB-500, GHK-Cu. We'll go for a good, I call them PBO walks outside. So parasympathetic beta oxidative walks, low heart rate, low arousal, chill. The whole point on competition day is not just to blow your wad getting all amped up. There's a time and a place. You want low arousal until it's time to turn it on. You turn it on for the lift, you pull back down. Second attempt, turn it back on, pull back down. And so doing those prophylactically is healing the system. And then things like I talked about cerebral lysin earlier can also come in, which drives 4 different neurotrophic factor families to drive up cerebral recovery and healing. It also drives dopaminergic centers and things like that. But taking that prophylactically on competition day or during peak week will make it feel like that peak week training didn't even happen from a neurochemical aspect. So you can replete your brain store so you're coming into the meet fresh, not feeling drained, tired, and lethargic.
So for those that are listening to this, is obviously we would hope for better performance on the day, which is obviously great. But how long did it take you to be able to train normally after a multiply meet? Like a month, right? So in that example, especially people wearing equipment, or say it's a strong, we've got Ilya here who goes into a strongman competition season where you might have a competition every weekend for 3 or 4 weeks. What are we looking at on the tail end then after that, whatever the thing is, the competition in terms of the recovery, if we've done that prophylactic thing?
So you do that prophylactically. That takes your 1 month recovery time frame down to maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Then post meet that night, usually repeat the same protocol, dump a bunch of additional calories in it, take the whole next day off. Like you spend that day and the following day completely recovering. So you'll assess how you wake up the day after the meet, and that could be more exosomes or more peptides, or you're pushing the growth hormones. There's all these different factors to consider, but the night of the meet, the morning of the meet, and the day after the meet are the 3 most important times.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that do end up competing the next week in back-to-back weekends, you can get them refreshed and ready to go by Wednesday if you follow these kinds of protocols.
Sure. Versus
being trashed for a month. Because no one, even if you're not competing, you want to get back to training. You don't want to be trashed for a month. That's not fun.
Yeah.
So
what I'm saying is for those who are in that scenario where, after a meet, they know the next 2 or 3 weeks are just a write-off.
Well, the biggest thing about those weeks, though, is 4 or 5 days you feel like you got hit by a truck, physically. The rest of it's mental. You're just mentally fucking shot.
Yep.
Right? So that makes sense that you should be able to bring that back.
Yep.
Because we're not talking muscular at this point. It's just mentally you're done.
And that's right. So that mental fatigue, that gets everyone in the strength community. Because again, if you're not firing neurons properly, they're not communicating with water, fascia, and mitochondria to contract the right fibers. And then all of a sudden, your squat walkout is different, and you sidestepped wrong. The foot placement's wrong, and then you missed the lift. That's all coming back to the neurochemical side of things. So then either during peak week, competition day, the following day, cerebral lysin comes in to drive up massive recovery. That's also where things like intranasal SS31, which is a peptide on the mitochondrial side of things. It actually helps with how electrons skip across the electron transport chain. Go to ATPase, you pump out some protons, combine with oxygen, all that cool stuff happens. It can help how electrons skip to produce less oxidative stress and damage, and to literally heal mitochondria from a couple different factors. But done intranasally does what? Straight to neural tissue.
Yeah, now we probably should put in there that if this is going to be a meet day protocol, your last 3 heavy sessions should be some form of a lower dose of all this.
Yes.
So you're not introducing something brand new on meet day.
Oh yeah, you buy all this.
A bad responder, and then you just fucked up your whole 6 months of training.
Completely. To me, you try this 4 or 6 weeks out.
Yeah.
You know how you respond to every peptide, every supplement. You do nothing new during peak week, and definitely nothing new on competition day.
Yeah.
So this is all definitely trialed and errored. Because although the variation is small for most people with these peptides, that one person could have a terrible response. And they could also over recover, and they're used to being under recovered, and that changes how they actually go through these patterns. And that pattern that they learned was technically wrong, but it still allowed them to lift that load. Whereas all of a sudden, if you recover them, they have all this extra energy. It becomes that jittery energy that they don't need, and then they can't perform. So you also have to take the psychology of the athlete. Is this the person who's training like 17 times a day? Like that person maybe want to pull back on the dose because he's not used to being recovered.
Sure. So if we go back to our fictitious athlete who wants to be performing well, feeling good in life, etc., right? We've kind of gone through the growth hormone, the healing peptides, thymus gland. What about, okay, summer's coming up and he wants to get jacked. Like we want to push fat loss more. What players are there in the peptide world that you see having the biggest impact when it comes to like body composition or bodybuilding and those types of things?
So we can't really not talk about SLU-PP332. That's the estrogen receptor related agonist. So that's the one that can drive up a lot of overall stimulation of beta oxidation, so you lose more fat. It can drive up glycolytic fiber type transformation. It'll store more glycogen intramuscularly. It will drive up every aspect of performance from VO2 max. It'll lower time to exhaustion. I've seen it almost do everything with Olympic athletes, with NFL, NHL, with everyone in the powerlifting community, with bodybuilders. It's very universally accepted, but it's so chemically strong. So it's something that you don't take too high of a dose. You start low, build up over time, because you might need higher doses, but you have to see how you respond to that. I think that's probably the best player, because usually mitochondrial health is not something that most powerlifters are caring about. When in reality, if you're trying to drive maximal performance, fat loss, whatever, mitochondria have to be taken care of. Right?
So is that a recovery day component?
SLU?
Yeah.
No, that'd be daily. And you could technically take it on rest days as well, but it's also going to drive the acute performance. So you could take it pre-workout, for example, to drive like a heavier alactic session or more glycolytic-wise. It's very universal. So you use it kind of interchangeably.
So you mentioned it being very chemically strong. Now, I know I had a client who was going to buy it recently, and they found a brand that made only 1,000 microgram tablets. So in context here, like, what would you say is like a good starting dose to find out how you tolerate this compound? Because, you know, it sounds wonderful, right? We probably all want to take it right now, but what is it what we would start at, and what is it we would maybe look out for as we try to drive that performance up using it?
So 100 micrograms all the way up to maybe a milligram or more than that. Usually people cannot handle more than 1 milligram. They're usually closer to like 400 to 600 micrograms or 750, like somewhere in that range where most people respond well to. The problem is with mitochondrial supplements, we have to worry about the millivoltage potential of your mitochondria. So healthy mitochondria exist at about 150 to 200 millivolts, right? You get sick, you overtrain, you're down to like 75 millivolts. You take too many mitochondrial peptides, you go up to like 250. So I call it overspinning and underspinning because I come more from like the quantum mechanics side of things. But in reality, it's just called hyper or hypopolarization. So same terms, I just call it different terms because I like it better that way. But if we are overspinning, we're being hyperpolarized by taking too much SLU, you see heart rate variability drop. You see respiration rates and heart rate overall start to jack up. You see overall rest, sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep all get tanked. You start to feel wired and tired. You feel like you had all those cups of coffee and you can't focus. A lot of people start to see higher HSCRPs, interleukin-6s, like your system as a whole, because you're driving your mitochondria too hard to function the way it's normally supposed to, it spins off a bunch of reactive oxygen species. So if you overspin, it spins off a lot of oxidation. If you underspin, it actually causes the mitochondria, they like explode, like literally drives apoptosis, they blow up type thing. So we're trying to get that sweet spot. With these peptides though, they can push you too far in one direction. So you'll start to notice the easy symptoms where it's like, you'll be amazing for the first 3 hours of the day and you're just tanked the rest of the day. Can't figure out why. It's usually too much of a mitochondrial supplement. And in this world, SLU tends to drive it the most and the hardest and the most efficiently. That being said, there's some hyper responders out there, some hypo responders. I've had some people do milligram, 5 milligrams. Like I've had people come to me that were taking 100 milligrams, which we're talking about micrograms, right? This individual only came to me because even though they were on TRT, testosterone was at like 200. They had no DHT, no estradiol, SHBG was through there, like everything was terrible, even on TRT. So SLU, again, that's an extreme example of a dose that no one's really affording, but it's that chemically strong, it could literally make your TRT essentially useless. Now, you could probably overcome that with more androgens, but the takeaway message is just start low and build up, because if you do need more, that's cool. But at least you know what you respond well to, because it's easier to not run into negative side effects. Because if you dose it too high, you could be out for a week, and a lot of people don't have that time to lose.
That sounds like the same with all these components that you're talking about, or compounds you're talking about.
Yep.
So, I mean, you mentioned earlier in the podcast that SLUP especially was one that you kind of championed, like you really wanted to see get out there, right?
I like to think so. I don't say that to be cocky or arrogant, but like that diisopropylamine dichloroacetate, band 15, there's been a lot of things over the years that I would like to hope I helped bring to the market. I didn't hear people talking about it when I was, and I'm very proud of that fact. So not trying to be like arrogant or cocky about it, but like I'm proud that it's like a household name now. I don't need the credit. I just like knowing that people finally like it and they're finally hearing about it and talking about it. Because SLU, I was using it originally because it was helping with a lot of liver-based cases. So people with like cirrhosis, liver failure, hepatomegaly, and then you see, has a lot of application over in these other sports, bringing into the Olympics. Guess what? It's not tested for. So all of a sudden you have this massive PED, this legal performance-driving supplement that no one's testing for. So we won 6 medals at the Paris Olympics. last year, and SLU was in all their protocols, or no, the majority. I think it was of the 6, I believe 4, but the majority of everyone else that had at the Olympics that didn't medal also had SLU in. So it's an awesome compound. I love it.
So, once, let's say someone wants to go and start with 100 micrograms, I'm sorry, not 100 milligrams. what are we going to see? Like they go in the gym, you said it's good pre-workout or whatever, like for a training session. What are we going to see when we pop in that 100 micrograms or whatever? Say we're a good responder and that's good. What are we expecting?
Imagine feeling lit up, meaning it's that training session where reps fly up. It's that training session where pumps are better. You have more mental clarity throughout the day, more energy throughout the day. You tend to get more hungry because you're just doing more, expending more, so you want to eat more. If anyone out there has ever had that mitochondrial driver that hard, you just feel good in every single way. It's like whenever you had that 1 cup of coffee and you were just good to go all day. Same thing, but this is actually working at the mitochondrial level. So pretty much everything, I hate trying to make it seem like it's this magical compound, but any mitochondrial supplement when done to the right level will make you feel like that. True. That's like one of the reasons why I can do as much as I do in a day and not get tired, because I keep my mitochondria, I'd like to think it's right at 200 millivolts. I don't obviously know for sure, but I make sure that my mitochondria are taken care of so I can keep producing every day. And I can tell if I have an off day, and if I am overspinning or underspinning, then you just correct for that.
Does it crash?
What does?
If you're using that for that day, towards the end of the day, are you crashing?
No, because you're making long-term genomic changes to your mitochondria. So even if you take, so this is why I don't like talk about the half-life of SLU or a lot of compounds, because every compound you take has a non-genomic action, meaning right now, and a genomic action, meaning genetic and epigenetically. So daily and also monthly, weekly, yearly. That's why I brought up the whole COVID scenario beforehand, right? It's changing you forever. So the SLU, even with the half-life being there, you take it upon waking and you're pretty much good to go the entire day, mostly spilling over to the next day as well. Some people get that 3rd day effect, but most people, if you take it daily, you never notice that downregulation. Some people take a couple weeks to not feel anymore. It really depends on where your millivoltage is at. And the problem is no one knows. There's some good mitochondrial tests out there like MeScreen, which I'm still trying to get a feel for. You can test your mitochondrial potential and things like that, but even that's not testing millivoltage. Like we do one consulting group I work with, we're testing millivoltage of mitochondria with different supplements. We're trying to see like, okay, SLU drives it this much, vitamin C drives it this much. Then at least you have a good framework to say, okay, I put this in, overspun, I'm probably at this millivoltage potential, so I should probably take less of a dose.
Yeah, it'd be interesting just to know what the baseline is.
Right, exactly. And we don't, you can do those like JC1 dye tests. We've done that a lot, but like you're not going to have that at home or anything.
Yeah, true.
Now I know that there's one company out there who I believe you work with. I don't want to mention names or whatever, just in case I'm wrong here, but that have made a combined BAM15 and SLUP supplement, right? Which
I formulated for them.
Yeah, so they are marketing this, and perhaps correctly so, as like the atomic bomb for fat loss, recomposition, right? And maybe there's some truth there. You're going to tell us, I hope. So in this scenario, then, when we're looking at that, it would probably be easy for people to think like, oh, it's just marketing or whatever, right? Whatever. So what is BAM15 bringing to the table there, and why is there a benefit to this interplay or combination of them?
So with that product specifically, I only formulate for the company. I don't name.
Yep.
Yeah, just making sure that's clear. What happens is, if you look at your mitochondria, okay, there's an outer layer, inner layer, there are these cristae that kind of come in the middle. They're like these invaginations, right? The surface area of those determine enzymatic action, which determines how you respond to all these players. You have the electron transport chain, you have all these areas, right? What BAM15 is working on is as a protonephron coupler. So as we have the electron transport chain, as you move electrons down the gradient to produce ATPase and all that cool stuff and get that spinning going on, you pump out protons. The protons and electrons, technically, if you overproduce them and overspin mitochondria, can leak. When they leak out, it's called proton-electron leak and slip. This is what 2,4-dinitrophenol is very well known for causing health problems, because it would overdrive. DNP. Exactly. It would overdrive proton-electron leak and slip, cause a lot of oxidation damage. So BAM15 drives protonephore translocation, not as chemically strong as DNP. So you don't get the proton-electron leak or slip unless if you take too much. You have just enough to waste ATP. You then have SLU come in, drive everything else that it does, but it also comes in. It'll modulate what's called peroxisome proliferated activator receptor gamma coactivator 1 alpha. So PGC1A. Like that's what everyone says. I like to say the full name because like I like to make people knowing exactly what we're talking about here, right? It's driving 1A and 1B to drive up every aspect of cellular repair at the mitochondrial level. So as you are hyperdriving BAM15 and hyperdriving the mitochondria and potentially throwing off too much oxidation, SLU is coming in and doing the cleanup work. So it's kind of a match made in heaven because you're hyperdriving the system, but then cleaning up the system. So the problem with that though, it's chemically strong. And if you take the two, they potentiate each other. So now we're talking about 100 micrograms of SLU and 50 milligrams of BAN15. That's one capsule. That's how I formulate it because that ratio matters. Most people are good at 1 or 2 caps. More than that, you run into problems because that can cause, if you just overdose like anything else, you overspin, too much oxidation, more inflammation. Some people work up to 3, 4, depends on the person, but usually a couple capsules is all you need. And all you're doing is hyperdriving beta oxidation, driving lipolysis, and then just wasting ATP.
Sure. So in perhaps oversimplified terms, BAN15 basically makes you waste energy or expend more energy for doing the exact same thing.
Yep.
And it's essentially DNP, but far safer.
Yeah, I don't even like correlating it to DNP because it has such a bad name.
Yeah.
But this is like the healthy version, just so everyone knows too. This isn't like, it's not the performance world that got a hold of it. Like I started doing this with Alzheimer's and dementia Parkinson's. And so back in the day, this was with 2,4-dinitrophenol because that was the best option we had because no one could source BAN15. Then we started bringing proton-4 translocation with BAN15 into the equation. Now we have the clearance of plaques, inflammatory proteins in the brain, and all these dementia, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer-based patients are getting better at a lower doses and without having to do the cleanup work of something like overdriving oxidation occurs. So BAN15 started off actually as a health player. And then we see the fat loss effects as an athlete. And then we brought it over to the athletic world. That's at least how, because I don't know before me who was talking about it. I'm sure people were, but I started over in the health world and then brought that to the athletic world when I saw what else it could do. So like we said, the primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary effects, you're trying to see what they all do. I was bringing it for neural health because it does also flux calcium channels in the brain. So it can act as a phonootropic, BAN15. It makes you feel so mentally clear, at least the majority of people. So start off with health, neural health, and then go, oh, it also drives fat loss. I can bring that in for my athletes. You see what else it does.
So you mentioned there are 3 things that you kind of maybe played a part in bringing to the market that you're happy about: SLUP, BAN15, and then what I would call Dada, because I can't pronounce the chemical name like you can. How is this different to those then? How, like if we've got our prepping bodybuilder or our guy training hard wants to get ripped for his wedding or whatever it might be, he's looking at that one and he's looked at this SLUP BAN15 product over here. Like what's different over here? Why would I sway one way or the other?
So another reason why I say the full chemical name is because as we have you doing with the neuroplastic work, as you can improve those cortical regions of speech, you can fire up every cortical center faster and easier. So I can recall memories and speak more clearly if I say the full name. If I say Dada, it doesn't activate the same cortical centers and then I don't feel like I speak as well. So diisopropylamine, dichloroacetate, DADA, Dada. What that's doing is it's modulating glycolysis. So if you look at the process of getting a glucose molecule down to pyruvate through all those coenzymes, then over here to acetyl-CoA, and then ultimate ATP generation, scroll back to pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. Right in the middle, there's this pyruvate dehydrogenase kinase 4 enzyme. You can inhibit that enzyme. That means you can allow as much pyruvate as you have to spill over into acetyl-CoA to give you more ATP. So literally, as long as you have pyruvate, you can produce ATP. It's not the enzyme that's the rate limiting factor. Normally, when you get tired in the gym, one of the rate limiting factors is that enzyme. You don't have that anymore. So you can have unlimited energy. The problem with that, though, is if you don't know how to use it properly, you overuse and abuse it, your 1 rep max for the day, you end up trying to triple and you tear a quad because your body was not ready to do a triple. So usually you have to bring it in with more intelligent athletes or people that are more veterans and can understand, okay, I should pull back on this today. I should not do this lift today. Because just because your musculature can handle it doesn't mean your soft tissue can. Doesn't mean your neurological tissue can, because then you might be tanked for 3 or 4 days. You have to be in a different protocol for that. So Dada basically allows you to have unlimited energy. It just has to be respected, kind of like everything else.
So would that play a better role then in, like, say, higher volume based phases? Or perhaps people who are involved in sports that involve higher volumes of training, like CrossFit athletes or High Rocks athletes, whatever it might be. Is that maybe a better application over there, whereas the SLUP and BAN15 might be better suited over here for the more strength-based world or whatever?
Actually, no, because if you look at overall strength accumulation, strength expression, going back to being very, very mitochondrially and neurologically dependent, even if you're more in the alactic world, you might run out of ATP pools from being low on the glycolytic side of things, and then you can't express as much strength. You can't fire those same fibers because you don't have enough ATP. So ATP in all forms comes in because when you're doing a 1 repetition max, you're putting everything into it. Your soul is going into that. You want every available source of ATP. So to me, it makes sense like the old 3-fuel theory, right? Or 2-fuel theory, whatever they call it, where you use fats as energy and glucose. If you're a good powerlifter, you're using everything. You're using glucose, you're using ketone bodies, you're using oxygen, you're using acetylcholine. For that 1 repetition max, you're using all of those. So to me, it makes more sense to supply everything because you're going to need them anyway.
Sure. So on that front now, that's data is covered. Fat loss is kind of covered. One peptides that often get talked about, but really seem to have very mixed reviews from what I've seen at least, is like the IGF-based peptides. Like they vary from people saying they're incredible to people saying I wasted so much money and got absolutely nothing from them. So those IGF derivatives or those IGF peptides, what are we seeing from them? Or what do the different ones do? And are there ones that genuinely are kind of dud or so on, the opposite?
So not in Creatine, we're talking about LR3 and DES, right? So the DES is more of a locally applied product. If you look at how myocytes, so how muscles grow, there's a spark of IGF, and then all the nuclear base changes to produce a new fiber, right? So IGF DES locally applied can spark myocyte maturation. So that as a localized growth player is amazing. LR, and again, amazing. It's a 10 to 15% player. It's not the game changer, but if you need more overall mass on your triceps to get a better bench or whatever arbitrary area you need, you can locally apply to change the dynamics of that area to change the mechanics. So locally applied DES, pretty awesome. Also for injury repair and recovery. I'm just trying to rebuild those tissues, right? LR3, I refer to it as like a super insulin because in reality, it was meant to have a longer binding potential to do more ultimate action. It doesn't work like that. It's more so driving hyperpartitioning, which still can be an amazing player in a post-workout recovery scenario, right? So in that kind of area, usually LR3 is better served to just drive more nutrient partitioning, like a glucose disposal agent or something like that, just to put more nutrients into muscle cells. But if I had to put a percentage on the two, I'd say generally most people are over with the DES with better application. And again, maybe that's a 10 or 15% player. The LR3 is maybe a 5 or 10% player, which still adds up over time, but they're not, and none of these things are like truly game changers where you put it in the next year superhuman. But they're these little tools over time that can really add up. Completely off topic, but LR3 is actually really good for people that have a lot of the different spider vein-based problems and the varicoles and issues like that. Because one of the problems with the vascular dysfunctional world is a lack of growth factors. So LR3 is actually better served over for there. So for athletes, I would almost always err on the side of DES, but that's more for localized growth.
Sure. Okay. So that might be like for a weak point for a competitive bodybuilder, or someone's got a sticking point in a bench press, front delt, whatever. Yep. That's what you'd be bringing that in.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, at some point previously, we did mention GLPs. So I think it would be silly not to cover them since they have exploded and probably going to continue to explode for a period of time now. I believe there might be a 4-stage agonist that's out now or very soon to be. So for those that maybe don't have much background in them at all, what is the difference between what is kind of being now referred to as GLP-1, 2, 3? Now we have a 4, and I'm sure you're aware of whatever else is coming next. What are they doing and how are they different? Why would, is one better for an athlete, one better for just someone who wants to lose weight, so on and so forth?
They're cool. So GLP-1 semaglutide. That is going to drive some beta oxidation. It's going to slow down gastric motility. It's going to pull down on the cravings and hungers and things like that. Has some other spillover effects, but because all of these, by the way, will be hepatically protective. They'll be actually every organ system of the body, from the brain to the heart to the kidneys to the livers. There's some amount of protection that goes on there. All of these are going to do that, right? So what makes them different? Semaglutide, to me, although it's amazing on all those, I see it as being the better player for any kind of binge eating disorders or the addictions. It tends to modulate that receptor complex in the brain better. Then we go to tirzepatide, which has a little more player on the overall lipolytic process. It'll still pull down hunger levels, slow down gastric motility, hits fat loss slightly harder because you now have a GIP component. We then go to retatrutide, which has a GCG. So that's a glucagon stimulation. That combines everything from the previous two, but the stimulation of glucagon drives amino acid deposition into muscle cells. So now it's like the recomping tool. Lower doses of Retato, and you tend to get hungry. So you could actually use it in the off season, powerlifter, strongman, bodybuilder, to actually drive hunger and drive anabolism, keep you leaner, keep you healthier at like microdoses, right? Then you work it up and then it will eventually slow down gastric motility, tank hunger, place and purpose for everything. The 4-stage they're bringing out is with an IGF molecule. So that IGF component actually cross-stimulates the GLP component. So whenever essentially there's a potentiation component. So what you do to one will affect the other. And right now, everyone's stimulating GLP without IGF. So they're bringing that to the market in order to kind of balance that out. And what they're seeing most of all is the neurological recovery. So they're seeing this as being like the next player for dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, because of the calcium flux changes and I don't want to say rehypertrophy of the brain, but we'll say the repair of the brain, right? And there's other things too that's going to come from that, from an anabolism and fat loss standpoint, because more nutrient partitioning is only going to help you, right? Then we go to a project I was a very proud part to be a part of, not part of it anymore, sold my rights, super happy with the payday, so can't talk too much about it. But that was the 5-stage agonist, and that's where we looked more at modulating myostatin and modulating, that whole side. So you get excited. We modulated GLP, GIP, GCG, myostatin, and activin, because myostatin and activin are the two components that can basically delete and turn off that myostatin process. That'll basically be the overall I don't want to say lever, but essentially the lever on if you can build muscle tissue that effectively, or if you can be blunted from that. And I want to make sure I say this though, because I've tried it out myself. I was a hyper responder. I was trying to come down because I was like 245, 250. I wanted to come down to 240, then 230 to slowly come down. Shot up to 260, 265. I just tried our myostatin component from that group I was working with. Haven't been able to come down since then. And it was the worst thing for me because I didn't want that. But I don't think it's going to be the game changer in the athletic community if androgens are high. In our group, what we saw is the higher populations with higher androgens, the less effective these myostatin inhibitors worked. So we're getting so much chemical expression from the androgens.
No, but in the older community,
exactly.
This is fucking huge.
In the older community, longevity community, and the HRT community and biohacking world, it's huge. Because then you don't have to go ahead and push your androgens. So the myostatin inhibitors, like, I think a lot of bodybuilders are saying this now. They're like, we don't need them. We have our androgens. And they're completely right. Like, I've seen this happen. But the longevity community, the muscle wasting disorders, not that those are all problems anymore, but over in those worlds, that's where there's a lot of big money. And that's kind of where that whole conversation's going.
So does that mean they wouldn't have to resistance train?
I don't want to, but I don't want to say that.
I know, but
like that, the whole goal is for them to have all these exercise pills in a bottle type thing, so you don't have to exercise. And I like that concept because then you can apply it to someone who is sick and dysfunctional, get them out of bed.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we're talking about this cancer patient that's been through chemo and they've lost all this tissue and all the other stuff, if that can put it right back on.
And I'm in talks right now with one oncology clinic, a big one in the US, to bring some peptides, at least education, so they can pair it with their chemotherapy and radiation, and then also potentially bring in some different myostatin components so that you are blunting the damaging effects from radiation and chemo. You are lysing and driving apoptosis of tumor cells more effectively, but you're also rebuilding the system.
So this is closer than what I thought it is.
What do you mean?
Of being on market.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because I'm thinking like 5 years from now, and this is like happening now.
Yeah, and even a step further, like because we're talking about mitochondrial peptides. Another group I do some work with is the whole mitochondrial transplantation and exogenous mitochondria world. So we're working on literally manufacturing. We get a bioreactor, and you're making mitochondria, healthy mitochondria. You can then inject into older populations, into sick populations, and then repair their entire system as a whole. Because everything's coming down to being mitochondria driven and dependent. So then you can also parlay this into the strength and athletic community and go,
it will. Right.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, but it's starting off.
It will be slow though, because they're not going to be able to afford it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but for the older people will live longer.
Yep.
I mean, socially, that can bring some weird things. Like, how are they going to afford to live?
So,
you know, we can live to be 150 years old, but people are retiring at 68. We're going to have a broken population.
So that's a whole problem I don't even like thinking about because like from my projections, what I believe is going to be happening in the next 5 or 10 years is if you have the finances and the knowledge, you will live to be 120 to 200 and vibrant. You're not going to be old and decrepit. You're going to feel like you're 20 or 30 or 40 the entire time. Like whatever age of time frame you felt your best at, you're going to feel like that forever. And the goal is to eventually die spontaneously because there's no suffering. But that longevity factor then brings about, what about the people that can't afford it? What about society as a whole? That's why they're like, honestly, I believe that's why they're doing the whole Mars thing and trying to find different areas to populate because we're going to run out of space. What happens?
This is the deep state solving for the population demise that we have.
Yeah.
Is we can't replenish the population, so let's just keep the people that we have to live longer.
Yeah.
So they can pay taxes longer.
Yeah.
Because without the taxes, they can't do any of this shit.
Hey, tax my peptide, tax my mitochondria. I don't care. Just let me buy them at Walmart.
Yeah.
Like if it's easier to access for everyone, that'd be awesome. you know?
So I got asked the question, you worked on the 5-stage agonist, which is not the super soldier serum that perhaps everyone was hoping it was, but
it's leading to it though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So what's the 6-stage agonist going to be? Do you think? Because it'll happen. It's going to happen, right? So what if you were there in your lab and this 5-stage agonist exists? What would you be adding to it to make the ultimate super soldier serum?
So I wouldn't. What I would be doing is then venturing down the clothos, the exosome, stem cell, having I want to call it, because I've already thought about this, the life bag, where you go to your clinician and he has a bag of life. And in there is clothos proteins, exosomes, exogenous mitochondria, all these things that repair your system from the baseline up so that you can stay feeling like 20, 30, or 40 forever. That's where I see the future. And at least some of the investors I've talked with, because I don't ever like being part of a company, I like just getting paid for my consulting service, because I like being my own boss. I don't want to venture into any stuff like that. I don't want to be part of a company. But everyone that has interest in that world all kind of sees it the same way. It's more what's going to be in that bag of life, essentially. But it's essentially going to be replacement therapy for everyone. So just like you do TRT, it'd be something like this. The problem is like the exosome thing, or the mitochondria thing. Trillions and trillions of mitochondria. So we're talking about having to put massive amounts into different systems. And we're trying to also figure out if mitochondria are universally acceptable, or if there's like a universal type of mitochondria, because there's A through Z type of mitochondria. So 26 different kinds. So we're figuring a lot out, but the end goal isn't the 5-stage. It's the 5-stage in the background with your HRT and all these other cool peptides to feel superhuman every day. But then once a year, once a month, once a quarter, whatever it ends up being, go in for your bag of life to kind of replete and replenish.
So you mentioned there, soon people living to be 120 or 200. Did you watch is it Don't Die documentary about Brian Johnson?
I finally watched that because I did all these podcasts and people were asking me about it. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I just don't follow anyone mainstream. I follow my wife on social media. That's it. And she never posts. So I don't scroll. So I only know names when people bring them up. And I felt bad. So I did. I actually finally watched that like last week. And everything I heard about Brian Johnson, I thought was wrong. Meaning he seems like a good guy who's just enjoying life, and I don't think his protocols are that crazy. Like I cut out the supplements I take in a day, the protocols I do, my Likovsky coils, my CO2 therapy, exosomes, like it seems, I don't want to say normal, but like I think he got a lot of backlash from that documentary. I thought it was cool.
I thought anything wrong with it. That's why I wanted your opinion on it, because like you're saying that, that stuff, he's obviously got the money to do things most people can't, which is part of the criticism that's put his way, which I think is unfair.
I love people like that because that's who pay me to do stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So, right? And like he's being the guinea pig for the stuff that's probably going to bleed down in our direction.
Exactly.
And become affordable for most. So like for him, he's got his 10,000 LUX light every morning. He's got his sleep mask with the whatever the light program is on it and all his tablets. Do you think actually that, maybe not that exact outcome, but something like that is actually closer for the Gen Pop than we think?
You mean like his protocol?
Or like just the fact that there's going to be that many players at play that are going to help extend his life. I can't remember what his biological aging results were and all that, but that could be the reality for Gen Pop perhaps in 20 years.
I think so, because if you look at biology, it's not one thing. There's not one cell, there's not one organ, there's not one stressor, there's not one anything. So it makes sense to me that there has to be multiple players. And like, I just got my biological age test done and I'm 4.4 years younger than I am. And I burn the candle at all 7 ends. Like I'm going 24/7. So I see myself I think I have poor genetics. If I can do this, I don't see why anyone else can't. But what's limiting most people is knowledge and then finances. So eventually, like you said, as this becomes more mainstream, people can afford it, more prices come down because there's more demand. That's when I see more people starting to have better quality of lives and living longer, because they'll just be more affordable and the education will be out there. Because even now, the education's just not out there yet. Everyone's still like, again, that documentary, people thought he was crazy. And I watched it and I'm like, I know like 1,000 people just like him that do all that every day. And they're all thriving in life. So I thought that was a cool documentary.
Sure. So before we move on to the nootropics, which I'm quite excited to cover, I think the last two, not technically peptides that would be worth covering because they're probably the most common would be L-carnitine and glutathione. Those are two names that probably most people know, that most can afford or have bought at some point or even looked at. What are best practices with those two, and what should we expect to see from them?
Carnitine. Another one of my little babies. I again didn't popularize, I did my small part. Tons of people before me talked about it, but I just had a love affair from carnitine from day one, because the old two-fuel theory, where you can use fat and carbohydrates for fuel at the same time. It's kind of what carnitine's doing in the mitochondria, right? We have all these different shuttles. It's going to shuttle all those fatty acids across the membrane, get to mitochondria, and oxidize it off. So number one, it lubes the beta oxidative process, so you lose fat faster. It directly drives up VO2 max. It pulls down time to exhaustion. It can actually clear seal groups, which doesn't sound that interesting, but as a power lifter, whenever you have a hard workout, post-workout, you feel trashed. Why is that? Because you burn through so much acetylcholine, you accumulate all these acetyl groups in the brain, different muscle tissues, and those localized areas drive up insulin resistance. So now that brain isn't healing post-workout until you clear those acetyl groups. You could do that with food, different things like that, but carnitine actually does it the best. So a small 100, 200 milligram dose of carnitine post-workout in the strength community is amazing, just to clear acetyl groups. We actually even used it. It's called a de-energized state. So you want to do it before bed at like a 50 milligram dosage to pull off and chelate heart-specific irons and to modulate the deacylation process of cardiac tissue. So anyone with any kind of left ventricular hypertrophy, cardiac myopathy, any cardiac problem, a microdose before bed, and that's going to start to slowly remodel your heart. Another cool thing about that is pair it with your growth hormone. If you look at all the cascades that they all drive, they actually are hitting them at the same time through different mechanisms. What I mean by that, lipase, so growth hormone, right? That will cause the release of lipase, the enzyme, cut off that fatty acid tail, fat's in the bloodstream. Carnitine comes in, picks up that fat, oxidizes it off the mitochondria. So you can potentiate your growth hormone by adding a little bit of carnitine to that. If you have a 10 IU vial of growth hormone, you only need 50 milligrams of carnitine. So super small amount, reconstitute it first, because if not, you will actually have it clump because the viscosity kind of screws up. But carnitine is an amazing molecule for health, for performance. I mean, you could use it so many different ways. It's a really cool player.
Sure. And what about glutathione then? Obviously, people look at that as like a recovery-based player. So what are the best practices we would see there? Like or even perhaps outside of just acute recovery from a workout, longevity perhaps as well? Yeah,
so every cell in our body is based on a ratio of oxidized to reduced glutathione. So you have GSH molecules and GSSG. GSSG is the used molecules. So you have a GSH molecule, right, glutathione. You take it exogenously, you produce it endogenously. It'll be used to heal a cell, and then it'll pair with another GSH. Now you have a formed GSSG molecule that's oxidized, can't be used. So what I did for one company in particular, I formulated a taurine product with their glutathione. So the taurine would act as a sulfide donor, break that bond, and now that used glutathione, that GSSG, turns back into two GSH usable molecules. So if you're looking at the ratios at a cellular level, kind of all of cellular life, health, whatever, is dependent upon glutathione ratios. So exogenous glutathione, just for long-term immunity, localized recovery, everything goes up. So you could do this in a microdose fashion daily with vitamin C, because injectable vitamin C will guide. Glutathione will then do the healing, because vitamin C as itself doesn't do a lot of healing, but it's a good guide, right? Or you could do it on the rest days, a couple days per week, at a higher bolus amount, and get a lot more recovery for that day.
Mm-hmm. So would it be possible to overuse that? Like, we need some stress, right? So like, same with all the BPC and TB-500, like you don't want to use high boluses every day.
And that's the only negative here with all these recovery modalities. Because Dr. Hans Selye was the stress of life, where you cause a stressor that causes an adaptation, you stress it again, adaptation, stress, adaptation. If you abolish that stressor, there's never an adaptation. Mm-hmm. So you can't over recover. I think it's harder to do than most people think, though. That's why I've been liking like the microdoses of glutathione and vitamin C a couple days per week, like maybe 5 days per week, weekends off with NAD therapy, do a couple different things there. But I think with our society today, how hard we train, the stressors, I think most people aren't going to be over managing oxidation anymore.
Sure. Okay.
Dave Tate here from EliteFTS to talk to you about bands. We've been a supplier of bands for almost 2 decades now. So I know my way around the band landscape. When I'm talking about bands, I'm talking about floss bands, long bands, short bands, bands you can use for resistance training, mobility training, body weight training, and flossing. One of our most popular bands, or actually our most popular bands, are the long bands. The long bands are typically used the most with squats, bench presses. Our floss bands are bands that you wrap around the joint to be able to help with mobility, circulation. And the short bands are designed for shorter range movements, bench press, deadlifts, and a lot of times people will use them with resistance machines to help accommodate the strength resistance curve. Head over to EliteFTS.com and look for bands in the toolbar or blowout menu.
First off, let's just talk about what is a nootropic, technically speaking, because like even now, like my mom, for example, would ask, I think this was a couple of months ago, like, Tom, what's a nootropic and should I take it? I was like, well, you drink tea or coffee, you already kind of are, right? So just to put this out there, like, when we say we're talking about nootropics here, what are we actually talking about?
So nootropic by definition should be a brain-based antioxidant. Okay. The problem is there's a lot of smart drugs out there and small molecules that give you a brain-based effect that aren't technically brain-based antioxidants. So I think nootropic is really anything that positively influences your neurochemistry, right? Because if we go down the antioxidants, it's semantics and who really cares? We're trying to take a nootropic for brain-based effects. So creatine, like we talked about before, that's a nootropic. Coffee, caffeine, that's nootropic. All these different over-the-counter supplements, herbs, mushrooms, there's tons of nootropics. But I think if we go by definition, we'll say anything that affects the brain in a positive manner.
So before we get you, I mean, you've mentioned cerebrolysine a few times. We'll go down that rabbit hole in a minute. That's a cool one. But, you know, let's look at just like over-the-counter regular stuff that, you know, maybe people can go on Amazon or whatever and get. What are we looking at in terms of should probably be players for most people? Because, you know, not all of us train hard, but all of us have cognitive demands. You know, that we share that in common, right? So there's probably stuff that everyone can benefit from. So what would you put under that umbrella as like, this is probably something everyone should do or should consider?
I think umbrella-wise kind of goes back to the earlier conversation of getting your brain to grow, right? One of the easiest things you could do for that is take anything that drives nerve growth factor, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or glial cell line-derived neurotrophic factor. So we have NGF, BDNF, and GDNF. Now on the NGF side of things, there's something called tiger milk. Tiger milk doesn't come from a tiger.
What's the difference between those the three things that you're talking about?
So we're looking at actually growing networks versus communication versus overall ultimate fueling. So like the glial cell line derived, the GDNF, that'll actually produce new stimuli in order to blunt synaptic pruning. Synaptic pruning is every day, at the end of the day, your brain doesn't want to grow. It consumes so much oxygen. So it cuts off things that doesn't think is essential anymore. If you drive GDNF properly, it stops that pruning process from happening. And that doesn't have to come from a supplement. That could be coming from learning a new skill. So like my recent one is learning a Rubik's Cube, which is so hard to master, but it's a new skill. It could be juggling, it could be rapping, it could be wiping your butt with your left hand. Literally, any new skill is going to drive up GDNF. Then we have BDNF. That's kind of, we'll say, the overall growth factor player, whereas I say more NGF is more of the communicator, right? So BDNF is kind of driven by everything from tiger milk to lion's mane to Selank to Semax, like you name it, it probably drives BDNF. So usually BDNF is not the problem. NGF, though, not as many things stimulate that. So that's where over-the-counter wise tiger milk I really like because it's an NGF mimetic. So it'll come in not as NGF, but act like NGF with its receptor and start driving the communication of neurons, which is pretty important because if you slowly build that neurological network, things have to be able to communicate and basically send synapses and signals.
So before we go down that rabbit hole, then you mentioned wiping your butt with your other hand, right? Whatever, right? What are we not doing now, day to day, that is actually causing us to get that synaptic pruning and that atrophy at a faster rate than maybe people were like 30 or 40 years ago? Because like the things we're talking about or experiencing weren't as much of a problem, at least then. So what is it we can do day to day to stop that atrophy?
So it's actually always been a problem. This isn't like direct atrophy like from your phones and technologies. This is more just the human brain doesn't want to grow because it consumes so much oxygen energy. It wants to stay its size. It doesn't want to keep growing. So just like training, our body doesn't really want to add muscle tissue. It wants to kind of stay at baseline. It doesn't want to add a ton of strength. It wants to be strong enough, but not hyper strong. So we're trying to blunt that natural process to make sure we can reach super physiological levels. That's kind of the whole goal here. And not even timeline related, but throughout history, usually you'd have your job, you come to your family, you might have a hobby, that's it. No one, like very few people actively try and learn new things every day. Unless if you're the Einsteins or the Lakhovskis or the Teslas, actively learning new things every day, learning new skills to make sure synaptic pruning didn't bite them in the butt. So it could be anything. I tell people, pick something you enjoy. For me, I want to be able to do a Rubik's Cube in like 2 minutes, just because it's impressive. Like how many people can do that? I can solve it, but it takes me forever, right? The next thing before that, actually, previous I did juggling. Not the best juggler, but still a new skill you learn. Before that was rapping. So might not always be applicable, but it's a new skill to make sure that I can keep thriving with my work life, with my family life and everything. So it's kind of always been there, always been a problem just because we're humans.
Sure.
Isn't there also the problem of degradation? Like if what's coming to my mind is a new skill. It's like people no longer write on paper.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, yep.
So because they're typing here, they're not writing on paper. There's a brain chemistry thing that's changing because of that, right?
1000%
So there's
right.
going to be that degradation.
Yes.
So if you can just stop that from getting worse, that's a win.
Correct. So that's not synaptic pruning related. That's direct atrophy. So that if you write in cursive, it's non-stop. You're having to connect both left and right hemispheres of the brain. And that non-stop movement pattern thinking, always moving, doesn't happen in today's society. Like you said, no one's doing cursive. They went from cursive to just print. Then they went from print to typing. And now typing isn't even spelling out laugh out loud, it's LOL. So things are getting shortened and shortened, and you're losing those skills. So cursive writing every single day, switching from dominant to non-dominant hand, stops that atrophy. 100% right.
Okay.
Awesome. So then if we start looking at those over-the-counter symptoms, you mentioned tiger's milk. You also mentioned lion's mane. So what are they doing? You mentioned the tiger's milk is the NGF mimetic. What are we going to see from that long-term versus what is the lion's mane going to bring in? What is sensible for people to start off with in terms of dosing? And I assume these aren't going to be the things like, I started taking tiger's milk and now my IQ's 20 points higher, right?
Exactly, yeah. So with the NGF mimetic of tiger's milk, we're mainly getting focus and concentration. So that's the biggest thing you'll notice. 300 milligrams, Nootropic Depot has an amazing tiger milk product. I'm not sure other ones out there that have the same sclerostin content because it's coming from mushrooms. With that, focus concentration, that's the main one. 300 milligrams, one capsule upon waking. That's generally a good starting place. Lion's mane, if you're looking at like an 8-to-1 ratio extract starting with 500 milligrams, there's a small percentage of the population that do have post-lion's mane syndrome. It's like the worst disorder. It's with Post-Finasteride Syndrome where you get neural atrophy, you have genital atrophy. Like it's a terrible disease, not the majority. But to those 5 or 10%, it's kind of like life altering in the worst way possible. So I always have to give that disclaimer because I work with a lot of those guys and I feel so bad for them. But lion's mane for the other 90% of the population only will drive BDNF and only will drive positive modulations to dopamine, serotonin-based centers. So lion's mane kind of turns the dial up on everything and it inhibits noradrenergic inhibition. So why that's important is because as we go through our day, getting overly sympathetic, drinking too much coffee, caffeine, things like that, glutamate levels will rise and that noradrenergic receptor starts being overstimulated. So you modulate the inhibition of that entire process. So it helps keep you more neurologically fueled, more energetic, and more focused as a long-term player. It's not going to be the shot of caffeine, but it's going to be, I feel more clear-headed today. I can recycle acetylcholine a little bit faster. To me, those are the two mushroom extracts are like the basic ones for overall neural health.
Sure. And you mentioned I don't want to say non-responders, but very negative responders to lion's mane there and post-finasteride.
Yep.
Is that the same mechanism? Or are they just shared symptoms?
Same mechanism. It'll essentially start by deleting the 5-alpha reductase enzyme. You then have no DHT, which starts to atrophy neural centers, which pulls down on dopaminergic transmission. So dopamine doesn't bind to receptors. Those people will literally, if you have a 3-inch flaccid hang, it will literally regress in minutes to like a 1/2-inch flaccid hang. You'll start being depressed. You'll have no energy, fatigue. Like imagine, because DHT and dopamine actually control elasticity in the skin. So their face will look like it starts to melt. And it's a really creepy phenomenon that a lot of people don't even accept in the medical community. And yet you have thousands of people that go through it. And like that's why like today, I always tell people, if you've used lion's mane before and you've never had this, you'll be good. You're not going to have that kind of response. But if you haven't taken it, I probably would wait. I probably wouldn't take it just in case you are that 5 or 10%. Sure. So like I've taken it every day of my life for like 5 years. I'm never going to have that response, so I'll always keep it in. But now when we talk about it, I want to make sure like, hey, big disclaimer, same thing with finasteride, same thing with Accutane. Actually, ashwagandha falls into this category as well. So if these are all compounds that can modulate that 5-alpha reductase enzyme and kind of make you bedridden and destroy your life. So good information to know.
In that circumstance, is the finasteride and the Accutane, are they stronger drivers than like a tab of lion's mane?
I want to say yes, but I've seen it play out equally across the board.
Well, I'm just wondering, could there be a protocol here where someone thinks they need Accutane or they think they need finasteride, so before they go down that route, they just take lion's mane for a day or two, and if they get this horrible reaction...
Oh, no. Oh, you're saying if you have one, you'll have the other?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
There's no connection. And that's the problem with this dysfunction. Of all the disorders I fix and reverse in all the athletes, PFS, PLMS, PS, all these diseases are the hardest to reverse.
True.
Because like I thrive on finding the pattern, tracking the trend in pattern, and then just knowing how to replicate that and seeing the variation from person to person, biology to biology.
True.
It's so hard to find that with PFS.
Okay, fair enough. Now, the world's most popular nootropic, caffeine. Yeah. What guidelines? Obviously, we all know what that is, right? We know where we're going to get it from, and everyone's going to have their preference. But what guidelines would you put out there for using caffeine well in like a sustainable manner? Because that's going to the problem, right? It's not just access is easy; it's abuse that's the problem. So, how do we get the most out of it without getting in the state where we're on our 5 cans of Monster Energy a day or whatever it might be?
So, receptor variability is going to be high, meaning everyone's going to metabolize caffeine very differently. General rule of thumb, 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram body weight of caffeine is right where you get the performance enhancing benefits of using it for a workout, but don't get spilled over into being too sympathetic. Now, even though that's a true statement for the majority, certain people do not feel a couple hundred milligrams of caffeine and they need 500, 600, 700 milligrams, but they get no downstream effects to tachycardia, no blood pressure, like they get no negative side effects. That's the minority, but most people at the lower end of a couple hundred milligrams a day, that's very sustainable. Like for myself, I have about 200 milligrams of caffeine pre-workout, and then I have a cup or two of coffee a couple hours after that.
Sure.
And whatever milligram that equates to, because coffee, caffeine, different content, all that cool stuff, it's never had any negative effect on my health, on my performance or anything, but I'm also managing glutamate. So in the brain, GABA and glutamate have to basically balance out, just like dopamine and serotonin. So if glutamate's high, GABA is going to be low. So this is the person who's always sympathetic, can't calm down, always go, go, go. Whereas if you have higher GABA levels and lower glutamate levels, you can get more parasympathetic, you can calm down, you can relax. So in this kind of world of caffeine abuse, it's also not just caffeine stimulant abuse, but it's too high glutamate levels. That's where good old Noopept comes in, and phenylacetylproleglycine ethyl ester to go ahead and abolish glutamate toxicity. So another nootropic you can bring in to actually fix too much caffeine usage.
Sure. So with that Noopept there, which we can discuss separately, but in this specific context, could Noopept be, say you've got someone who's like loves coffee or whatever, and they maybe work long shifts and they kind of have to use a lot of caffeine. Would Noopept basically there almost be like a safety mechanism where you can stop it having some of those deleterious effects?
1000%. I've contacted coffee companies to put Noopept in their coffee blends because it would allow people to have less coffee. And this is why they didn't want to do it, because they use less scoops. But you could use less coffee, use less caffeine, but get a better nootropic effect and have higher, or rather lower, glutamate levels. You'd pull down high glutamate levels. So yeah, Noopept alongside caffeine, if you're using it in that fashion, you could use that daily. If you're using, so Noopept drives motor cortex functioning pretty well. So motor learning shoots through the roof. Verbal fluency, that's why I did 10 milligrams intranasal before this podcast, because verbal fluency just shoots up for me, right? If you're using a pre-workout setting to drive motor learning, so you remember how to squat, bench, deadlift, contract bicep, whatever, that's usually going to be done infrequently, because motor learning, that whole process has a cooldown period. So you have to make sure that you're giving your brain enough time to solidify that memory so you can actually pull from it from long-term memory, because we don't want to have a short-term memory that just gets deleted. We want to file it away in long-term memory so we can actually pull from that forever.
Sure. So that would be something to bring in, like training session was like, oh, my squat sucks. Or I'd been to see Dave and he's like changed my squat completely. So for the next like 8 weeks, every once a week or twice a week when I squat, I take Noopept to help ingrain those.
Exactly.
changes.
And you can even do that when you have people come in, you're fixing their movement patterns. 2 nasal sprays, so about 10 milligrams of Noopept right beforehand. They'll be focused, concentrated, motor contractility and overall motor unit recruitment will go up, and they'll remember what you say better. So then the hour they spend here with you or whatever will be ingrained to them. It's more like they had 10 hours of work with you. So you can get more efficiency out of that to save yourself more time and everyone more time.
But I'm presuming this isn't just motor learning then. Like we could take that same person in a different context, like they're studying for an exam.
Yep.
But it wouldn't be used every day. Like if they've got like maybe a big study session or a class they're struggling with, would that be a good example?
Exactly. And learning is learning is learning. Everything in life is a learned habit that we can learn better or we can unlearn. Same thing with organs, like we talked about before. You can unlearn bad organ habits, and then you can also relearn bad organ habits. Same thing with training, same thing with academics. It's all basically learning based.
Sure. So their Noopept could be daily, low dose for glutamate issues. Yep. Would that also be good then if glutamate is a problem? someone has a glutamate-based issue from something else, whether it's processed food, whatever, blue screens, whatever, that could be used there as well.
Oh, yeah, especially in like the drug abuse communities, so more like the hard street recreational drugs, usually kind of weaning them off of a lot of those heavier, harsh compounds. Noopept comes in pretty handy.
Okay, cool. So it would be very remiss to have a conversation about nootropics and not mention methylene blue.
You have to, right?
Right, because it's very much in vogue right now, and there are some people who paint it out to be the devil and it's going to kill you and whatever else, and then for other people it's just every single person should take it, which we know both is never true. So what does methylene blue bring to the table that's unique? Why is it in vogue now when it's existed for God knows how long? And what do we need to take into consideration with it?
So, like you said, everything's a tool. There's nothing good or bad. It's situation specific. So we don't like to paint things as good or bad. Just a tool. You may not need it. Your friend might need it. Your mom might need it. Your dad might not. So methylene blue. I think it's in vogue now mainly because RFK had that video where he dropped it in. I was asked that on the Mind Pump podcast. Like, I think that kind of really blew it up. But before that, social media trends, at least from what I've heard, because I don't follow social media patterns at all. But everyone I know in that world that really tracks those patterns, there was one individual that started, I forget which company it was, so I don't want to speak out of term. They were trying to blow up their methylene blue sales because they were super low, and they found some way to pay the right influencers, start the right trend, started there, spilled over into getting more mainstream, RFK. I think that was the timeline, but I don't want to speak out on who started that. But to me, it's an amazing tool if used in the right way. In the neurological world, it does drive up something called cerebral metabolic rate pretty exceptionally. So it's modulate the mitochondria in your neural centers to fire faster, to process faster. What that means, though, is you're going to also burn through neurological substrate faster. So if you're taking methylene blue and any of these pretty big chemical drivers, resupply acetylcholine, resupply ketone bodies, resupply these different neurological fueling agents, because your machine, your brain's going to burn through them. It's just like if you were in a caloric deficit, but now you're in a neurological deficit. So you have to make sure you're replacing those. So it does manage monoamine oxidase. So if you are taking like SSRIs or any kind of neurological compounds, it can cross-potentiate them, which could be bad or worse, good or bad rather. So depending on the person, make sure you're checking what else is in play neurochemically. But as a neurological antioxidant, pulling down inflammation, it does that pretty well. It's a pretty big antiviral, antibacterial. In the nootropic space world, we could use it as a daily performance aid for training, for work, for kind of anything. And usually if we're trying to go down the spectrum of dosage, right? Dosage and frequency. If we low dose it and do it more frequently, that's someone who has like Babesia or Lyme's or some kind of disease where it's a daily effector at like sub 10 milligrams. That's a good player for long COVID, good player for a lot of disease and dysfunctions. If you're using it to fuel your workouts from a neurochemical aspect or just work in daily life, dosage usually goes up to 20 to 40 milligrams. That's where most people get that neurological driver on cerebral metabolic rate, but that's usually 2 or 3 times per week because we're not trying to use these neurochemical compounds every single day, right? These ones that have such a high chemical signaling threshold, like methylene blue, use them every day, jacks up dopamine levels, and then you don't actually stop producing your own, but you become accustomed to a higher level. And then if you pull it out, just like any other kind of withdrawal symptom, you're out of dopamine. You're used to having ampules of dopamine, now it's gone. So ideally, we're not trying to band-aid, we're trying to elevate our baseline. And you tend to only be able to do that with neurochemistry and all these compounds, but doing them infrequently. So methylene blue, if you guys had hard work days and train days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 20 milligrams, Monday, Wednesday, Friday upon waking. Work that up to maybe 25, 30, 35, 40. You'll find your sweet spot. We never want to be sympathetic. We never want to be going too fast. If you feel like you're kind of cracked out a little bit, too much of any neurochemical compound, pull the dosage down. You should be vibrant, focused, and concentrated, but you should have focused energy. It shouldn't be wired and tired.
Sure. So you mentioned there also fueling the process. And I'm sure you see this in the longevity community, the training community, and the nootropic community. Everyone is worried about processing going up and up and up, whether it's training or studying or whatever. Maybe that gets overlooked. So you mentioned there choline and you mentioned ketones. What role are they playing? Because I know ketones especially, most people look at that and think, I'm not doing a keto diet, or like this is some kind of weird fad, they don't do anything, which is quite a common thought process with them. So what are ketones bringing to the table, and what's choline derivatives bringing to the table there?
So everyone knows metabolic flexibility. So now we're switching the gears into neurological flexibility. So this is look at the 4 main substrates that our brain can really thrive on, which is acetylcholine, ketone bodies, glucose, and oxygen, right? So if you hear that properly, you go, I can fuel my brain by eating more carbs. I can fuel my brain by eating more fats or taking exogenous ketone bodies. I can also fuel it with straight acetylcholine from like an alpha GPC, which is basically like a straight acetylcholine donor. You can donate methyl groups to the process with like an alpha GPC, things like that. Or you could do things like you could have an oxygen generator, or you can have superoxygenated water to donate more oxygen to your brain. So like what I do, just because it's easier at home, you have inhale hydrogen oxygen water, superoxygenated water. So after my second workout of the day, I'll down one of those because then the kids come home, I want to play with them all day. But I have to replete what I just burned off all day. So throughout my day, I'll have a period where I have more glucose intake, more ketone bodies, more acetylcholine, more oxygen. So you're giving your brain a different fuel source to run on because you can only drive it so hard and you can't always constantly replete glucose. So instead of trying to keep repleting one source, why not have 4? So that's where this conversation comes in. We can start to pick and choose throughout your day when you need them. And even certain days, you might have an off day. You might not need anything. But then on a pretty hard day, you might start your day off with some alpha GPC. Then midday, you might do exogenous ketones. Then maybe, towards the ending latter half of the day, you might have a bigger carbohydrate meal, or you might have to inhale oxygen water, or you might have some other oxygen component, even hypoxia training, because the post-exercise oxygen consumption pushes more oxygen to the brain. So you can layer it a bunch of different ways, but usually just like you fuel your training, kind of go fuel your brain.
Sure. And do you find that for a lot of people, that is the limiting factor?
Yeah, I think a lot of people underfuel because you don't think about it. You think just because I'm eating, my brain's going to work. And it's running on a completely different system than the rest of our body. So that's why I talk about mitochondrial flexibility, metabolic flexibility, and neurological flexibility, because we can fuel these different systems with different substrate. So we talked about the brain, the mitochondria is more the cofactors, vitamins, minerals, and then the body, the metabolic flexibility is more the macronutrients, the protein, fats, and carbs. So there's still some spill over the brain.
If fueling, this might be a terrible question for you, and I apologize if it is. If fueling is an issue, like there's a genuine lack of glucose, ketones, choline, are there any signs that is the problem, as opposed to like, I just need to learn more or take an actual nootropic as opposed to fuel better? Are there different symptoms that might present?
I would probably fuel first before anything else, because you can't hyperdrive the system if the system isn't being fueled. So normally symptomology wise, like the brain fog, the waking up in the morning and you're just like, you're never recovered. You wake up, it takes an hour to get going. Those kind of phenomena, the inability to recall memories, usually that's a fueling problem. And you can test out yourself. Go have a huge deflux meal, a big cheat meal, flux a bunch of dopamine. And if the next day you feel better and your memory is better, your speech linguistics is improved, could have just been a calorie problem or a dopamine problem. Then same thing, wait till that happens again. You have brain fog, can't wake up that good. 2 caps alpha GPC, 300 milligrams. Make sure you get the L version. So on the back of the bottle, it'll say L-alpha glycerylphosphocholene. That's the left-hand enantiomer, which has the full molecule, right? So you want about 600 milligrams of that. See how you respond. If you're good, then cool. You know that was acetylcholine being wasted. If you, same kind of scenario, try it with exogenous ketone bodies. Same thing, see how you respond, because certain ones will actually cause you to be overly sympathetic and overly driven. So oh, it wasn't acetylcholine because that alpha GPC made me feel terrible all day. But then the ketone bodies worked, or the oxygen worked, or the free meal worked. And that'll kind of tell you how to move forward.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you. So I think next one that would be good to go over, because I think all of us here at the table are a fan of it, would be modafinil.
Yeah.
And its derivatives. So again, that one is one that probably a lot of people look at maybe slightly fearfully or cautiously, or maybe rightly so. What are we looking to get from modafinil? And is that one that actually is probably got a broader application than people think?
Really does. It has a massive application. I think the misunderstanding comes in when people use it daily. Because again, you go from the long-term neuroplastic change to improve your brain to a Band-Aid. Just taking something every single day, your body gets accustomed to it. It never has to force adaptation, never has to hypertrophy, never has to progress, because you're banding it all the time. So modafinil, same thing, a couple days per week. What we're seeing it doing is driving up every single system, from histamine release in the lateral hypothalamus to dopamine levels to norepinephrine levels, everything but GABA-based levels, which actually downregulates, it jacks up. Orexin A starts to increase, so you see focus, concentration. Again, not everyone's a good responder, but the people that are, get alertness, focus, concentration. It spills over into the next day for the next 48 hours, but you don't have any sleep negative effects at night. If you're getting poor sleep effects at night, you either took too high of a dose or you're a poor responder. Best scenario, and how most people should know when you find a good dose, amazing energy all day, sleep like a baby that night, and even feel a little bit more upregulated the next day. Not the same as that day. That's another reason why, because we have that 48-hour spillover effect. I ideally do like the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or something, because you're having additional spillover the next day. But as an overall rule of thumb, it's one of the better nootropics out there. But I think it gets a bad rap because of this. We're talking about how awesome it is, but then the poor responders will come on and say, I couldn't sleep and I felt terrible. And that's true. If that's you, go with like a phenylparastam hydrazide, which is not close at all. Actually, it's working through different chemical means. It's allowing the acetylcholine receptors to be more receptive to more acetylcholine, so you can take more in, but it also manages glutamate, or rather it manages dopamine, serotonin, all those cool things, pulls down glutamate, does a little bit of everything. Usually if someone's a poor responder to modafinil, then the phenylparacetam is usually where they respond really good to. Most people, like we'll say 80% is good modafinil, and the other 20% can only use phenylparacetam, but you can also use both. So you could have a day of modafinil, day of phenylparacetam. You can also go ahead and get Orexin A nasal spray. So Orexin A is a portion of what modafinil drives for the focus and concentration, but doesn't touch dopamine. So if you're someone who has the fine mood effects and you're good on everything, but you just need focus and concentration, Orexin A, part of which modafinil drives, you can just get as a straight nasal spray. And you could use that days in between or replace modafinil. So you have a lot of different combinations there.
And why would someone choose modafinil over Adderall, which is possibly like the more well-known or more, I would probably say more abused version of it?
Yeah. Adderall is ultimate energy, go, 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 no emotional connection, and more neural atrophy when done consistently. So modafinil, you could technically abuse higher doses more frequently and not have much neural atrophy, still some. But Adderall is so chemically strong, it will start to pull down on processing centers and will be more addictive in that nature. So that, again, it's a tool. Not good, not bad. I think Adderall comes in 1 day per month if you're a good responder and only if you need it. So if I have to stay up for 3 or 4 days at a time, I actually can't take it. I'm a poor responder to it, so it's not my compound. But if you were a good responder to it, a couple milligrams, only 1 time per month or 1 time per week or whatever fits in your paradigm with your life without abusing it more than once a week, to me, that's where it comes in as an amazing player. So like you said, it's 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams every day, a couple times per day, and then that adds up.
Sure. So Adderall should be like a behind a break glass in case of emergency type thing.
Basically. Yeah, exactly. I like that.
Sure. So two others that people probably know of or, have maybe heard of would be Selank and Semax. I mean, you can even believe I can get Semax now on Amazon and places like that, and the nasal spray. So it's becoming more readily available, which is cool. The biggest question everyone's always going to have is what's the difference for a start? So can we go over what the difference between, because they're marketed very similar. Obviously, they're both doing something for brain function. So again, what are they doing differently? What might make me or someone else a better candidate for one or the other?
I see them as being completely opposite. But like you said, on paper, it looks like exactly the same. So Selank in this category is the anxiolytic aid that'll activate about 85 GABAergic genes. So this is the player you need if you need focus and concentration and a low arousal. So Olympic archers, quarterbacks, football-wise, like if you need low arousal but focus without getting too sympathetic, that's where Selank really helps. It also helps with people that have anxiety, people on the autistic spectrum. Like that's where Selank really kind of dominates. Whereas if we go over to Semax, I see that as being more the dopaminergic, serotonergic player. So if you were someone who brought in modafinil and the mood effects felt that good for you and you felt like you were at a dopamine deficit the majority of your life, Semax might be a little bit of a better option.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying what you're watching, make sure to take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe.
Doesn't have the same GABAergic changes, can still drive neuroplasticity, but more from a dopamine balancing side of things. Both are going to spill over with BDNF. Both are going to spill over with some acetylcholine changes, but usually differentiating between the two, that's usually how we do it.
Sure. So like Selank would it be like a flow state kind of would be a good way of describing it?
Yeah, reacting autonomously, just kind of go in, low heart rate, low arousal, low ventilation.
Sure. So you mentioned it playing a role in autism and things like that there. There's going to be quite a reasonable amount of people that are on that kind of spectrum that seem to get, should we say, opposite effects to a lot of these things, whether it's caffeine or some people can literally use caffeine to go to sleep. Yep. If they are in that camp, first off, why? What's happening to make that happen? And are there other options for them that do, like you mentioned Semax is Selank is a good player for those with autism, but are there other options for people who fall in that category where I can't drink coffee because it's a sleep aid?
So autism specifically, What we're seeing there is, and it's tough because there's so many different kinds of autism, and there's autism in different parts of the brain. So I don't think many people talk about this, but when you actually look at functional MRIs, because I've had all my individuals get them in that spectrum, you see cortical changes completely different than yours, than mine, than everyone's. So you're introducing a substance into a completely different body. It's almost the same example of if you were to bring Selank into the most genetically elite person, whoever that powerlifter was we were talking about before the podcast, versus me versus that autistic kid, we're all going to respond differently, only because our cortical centers are so different. And in the autistic community, there are almost endless amounts of differences. So it's super complicated. I don't fully understand it. So usually if you see that effect, you can see, okay, how do they respond to that GABAergic stimulation? If it was a negative, what does that tell you, right? Oh, we can do the opposite. You literally jack up glutamate levels and it will actually improve their response. So it'll give a GABAergic reaction to a glutamate driver. And I've seen that happen all the time. Selank, though, is pretty universally accepted in that specific disorder where I see it work pretty well. Again, nothing's extremely universal, but 80%, maybe 90% of the time, Selank works super well.
Sure. Okay. One that you've already mentioned a few times was cerebral lysine, which is an interesting one because, I think you've mentioned before that it's probably the best one universally in terms of what it plays on. It's an amino acid from a pig's brain. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, which when you say that, someone probably is going to think, why on earth would I take that? What is that going to do to me? But why are we going to use that? And why I believe you said at some point that it's probably the best universal player as a nootropic. Why is that?
So I'll say it's the best universal player as a repair agent, not as a nootropic.
Sure.
Right. So just clarifying, if we look at what it does in terms of driving up all 4 nootropic factor families, that means BDNF, GDNF, vascular endothelial growth factors, so VEGF, basically all of the nootropic factors that can drive neurological plasticity, so things that can improve your brain, all get upregulated. Almost every other supplement out there does 1, 2, or 3. This does 4 to 10. So it's hitting every single level. That also means it's going to jack up all neurotransmitters. So dopamine levels can go through the roof. The problem with it is you can take it and we start low, 1 milliliter, just see how you respond. It can either drive the repair process or be very stimulatory, but still driving repair. So although we take it to repair the brain from overtraining, from overstress, from overworkload, from whatever, it can still drive that stimulatory response. So best case scenario, if you get the repair process, you take it at the end of a hard work day or post-workout of a hard workout session, if you're the athlete, and then you chill the rest of the day, big post-workout meal, you're good to go. If you were to take that and get stimulated, we don't want that. So you want to take it the following morning to repair the process from the day before, but also the fuel that day. So it does depend on the person, but depending on if you get stimulated or not from it would dictate when you time it. But in terms of overall neurological repair, that's got to be the highest one out there, one of the highest ones. That's why we use it in bolus amounts for a lot of plaque-based cases, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Usually those are IV, 50 mil, 100 mil, like higher boluses. But in the athletic world, in the entrepreneurial world, 1 milliliter, 5 milliliters works extremely well.
And that would that be like, say, at the weekend to recover from your work week, or like to recover from your hardest training session of the week, for example? You
could, yeah, depending on the athlete. So athlete A example, maybe he's terrible at his squat and deadlift, but it made it on his bench. We put a post-workout 5 mil on squat and deadlift days because that's when he needs the most.
Yeah, sure. And then another one I've got written down here again, which is easier to get hold of now, is dihexa.
Yes.
So again, that I believe works on a different action once again to everything else that you've talked about here. So may as well try and fill in the blanks here. What does that do differently that might make it a better choice in whatever context we're talking about?
So the different primary action is going to be the connectivity of neurons. So dihex can do a lot of things, but driving not just neurogenesis or creation of new neurons, but mainly how they connect and how they communicate. That's going to drive up, first of all, long-term changes. So you can pull from long-term memory better. You can pull from short-term memory better, all that cool stuff. But that connectivity process is then going to drive focus and concentration. Problem is it's usually sold in like 5 milligram tablets. Most people, unless if it's stacked with other compounds, need at least 15 or 20 milligrams. So right there, the dose, like usually for how they sell, it's kind of off. It gets more expensive. But if you stack with other compounds, you might only need 5 or 10 milligrams. But focus and concentration, but long-term neural connectivity can really be driven up high from that.
Sure. So if you're like studying at college or something and you know your exams are 9 months away, would it make the studying you're doing now easier to recall months later?
Definitely. And in that scenario, we could do an every other day approach of like a Noopept one day, dihexa the next day. Still driving learning through different cascades, all with the end goal of hypertrophying the brain, increasing communication speeds and networking speeds, and not causing problems, because we're not trying to band-aid, we're trying to elevate our baseline.
Sure. But in theory then, we're talking about all these different compounds and how we don't want a band-aid, but we can drive up different pathways on different days, which are consecutive.
Correct. Yes. Sorry, I didn't clarify on that. Yeah. Ideally, I still like 1 or 2 days per week where you don't take that much. Like the over-the-counter mushrooms and like those basic players, going back to chemical signaling potential, those are still capped at physiological limits. If it can't go super physiological, then you almost can't take too much of it. I mean, you can have other negative side effects. It's not going to cause the Band-Aid effect. So tiger's milk, you take every day. Lion's mane, if you're a good responder, every day. DHEA, pregnenolone, every day. Alpha GPC, every day. Once you go to dihexa, Noopept, lysine, those almost can't be every day because they have such a higher signaling threshold. That can reach supra-physiological limits, and then that's when you can run into trouble if you do it too often.
Sure. Okay. So another whole category that you're involved with and to put information out, which I think is probably an even newer category, would be bioregulators.
Yes.
So people...
nicotine.
Nicotine, yeah.
So that falls in the nootropic.
Yeah, nicotine's an awesome one. So it'll modulate those nicotinic acetylcholine-based receptors. So nicotinic cholinergic-based receptors, actually. Beyond what it does for driving up cerebral metabolic rate, so driving up focus, concentration, memory recall, pulling down neuroinflammation. Another cool thing it can do is it can actually bind to those receptors in the brain. So if you do have a COVID scenario, you won't get long COVID. You won't get the brain fog because it's occupying that receptor. So during COVID, I had everyone wear nicotine patches around the airports and things like that. 7 milligram patches, so 0.33 milligram release rate per hour, and you're just occupying binding. So you can use that as another neurochemical player to drive more neurological action in between other days. So if you have like a modafinil or a phenylpiracetam and a nicotine, those won't be on the same day. You do those on opposing days. So you could do a 3-day rotation of modafinil, phenylpiracetam, nicotine, and then cycle back. Again, with nicotine though, because it's driving so much neurological action, you generally have to fuel that. Just like modafinil, if you get the headaches, so you're like, twisting your neck, pulling your traps, your brain is trying to pull acetylcholine. It'll pull it from your neck and your upper traps first when it doesn't have any more. So if you have those kind of headaches and like the migraines, if you replace acetylcholine on those products, it usually fixes that up right away because it's just looking for more acetylcholine.
And then for those, if that is, so we've mentioned kind of caffeine, if that's used if nicotine is used which it commonly is, right? What is the downside of that downregulation? How does that present? Like, is it just you're getting less, or do you start to see all of that getting worse over time? You mentioned with the neck pain and things.
Just with nicotine and caffeine?
Nicotine.
Okay, yeah. So with nicotine, you will develop a tolerance, and then you will have to take more and more. You'll have all these neurochemical players because you get so used to that baseline adaptation. So if nicotine's present every day, and again, this is at higher doses. So if you're at a moderate dose, same kind of thing like the Methylene Blue, you could have that every single day, but it's not as much for the neurological nootropic effect.
What's a moderate dose?
So nicotine, you could do 1 or 2 milligrams pretty much every single day and not have problems. Once you go to 3 to 5, okay, probably should be every other day or a couple times per week. But then people with the Zyn patches that are, yeah, I see you, yeah.
What's a Dave dose?
Yeah, what is it?
We'll talk about that later.
But so yeah, it'll just long term, it'll just end up causing problems. If it hasn't yet, then you'll just always require that. And once you try and come down from like you would miss a day, then you get kind of the withdrawal symptoms. You start kind of, I don't want to say tweaking out, but usually if you build up that tolerance, it's just harder to come off the higher it gets.
Well, if it's the delivery mechanism, right? So what I wonder with that, say it's a patch or a nicotine pouch or the cigarettes, forget the cigarettes. If it says it's 3 milligrams on there, my question would be, how is that absorbed? Is that full 3 milligrams getting into the system? Right? Because this will play into kind of like all these things as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like what is it? But then what does that actually mean when it, because it may say 3 milligrams, but what's getting absorbed?
And the only, because I understand that perspective too, the only problem with that perspective is then you run into the question of every dose. Be like, you're questioning everything. The calories on the back of your food, there's a margin of error by like 100 calories. So your 100 calorie snack packs could be upwards of 200 calories and I have to report it. Same thing with these kind of compounds. So you're kind of questioning everything and then you kind of have no baseline. So even though it might not be 3 milligrams, it's still a baseline.
Yeah, I get it.
You could call it 1 milligram, but you can't really measure it.
Yeah.
Sure. So if we
lower it.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So for those that may well start hearing the term bioregulator coming out around soon, because it's going to go up, and what are we talking about here? Like, why are these a different category altogether? What are they doing? And are these maybe going to be the next things that blow up? Like, are these the next peptides, for example, that we're all going to start hearing about the next couple of years?
So been around for decades. Dr. Kabat-Zinn did a lot of work on them. Essentially, we're looking at smaller chains of amino acids. It's like 1, 2, 3, like very small molecules. These are traversing the cell, so they don't have to bind any receptor, and they're only turning on epigenetic expression. The problem, so love Dr. Kabat-Zinn's work, RIP, like he did some amazing stuff. All of the experience that I've seen, and this is again, 10 plus years, thousands of people, they're amazing players, but they either work for you or not at all. So it's almost like a 50-50 scenario. And I'm a hyper responder. I respond so well to them, but I've had so many people run through these courses and they get no response from them. So it could be the receptor-based, or rather the non-receptor mediated action of how they clear the cell membrane, which would come down to how everyone's individual cell membranes are stronger or weaker. Could be something like that. Obviously, we don't really know, but it's a 50-50 player. So to me, I think everyone should try a bioregulator course and then see how you respond. If you respond well, cool. You're probably going to respond well to all of them. That's at least what I've seen in practice. I haven't seen them be universally acceptable, but again, the 50% that do respond well, it's like a godsend. So to me, I do like them. To me, they're still, even though I said it was a godsend, still 20% player. So even though it's not going to be the 100% player, you start stacking bioregulators with peptides, with hormones, with all these other supplements, and now you have the complete athlete, the complete person. So bioregulators aren't as chemically strong. They are a step above over-the-counter supplements, but a step below peptides, which are a step below hormones in terms of how much chemical signaling action they can give. Sure. So that's cool though, because if these over-the-counter supplements work that well, then bioregulators work a little bit better, and then peptides a little bit better. So it definitely is a complementary therapy. It's never going to like take over the peptides, just like peptides are going to never take over hormones. To me, it's more in a properly periodized program. For if you're an athlete, sick, doesn't matter, you're going to have one of all these players, or maybe, one or two of these players.
Sure. So can you give a couple of examples of what bioregulators are out there, but maybe what are the most popular ones out there, right now, and what are they doing for people? So
Cardilax is an injectable bioregulator. That's the one that repairs cartilage tissue. That's one that, again, NFL world, NHL world, with the people I work with over there, not banned, completely legal, and it repairs cartilage like crazy. So Cardilax is a big one. Vladinix is one that's an oral bioregulator. That one drives more of the thymic gland replacement. So you start replacing the thymic gland, you could start actually regenerating it. So that's one that usually I'd bring it in a rotation. So you could have like one bioregulator per day, rotate to the next one the next month. Tons of different protocols you can do for that, but that's a really good player. There's also in the hormonal world, testosterone for the testicles for males, and then xenolytin for the ovaries for females. Out of all of the bioregulators, those tend to work pretty universally well. Again, still the 50-50, but in the 50% that respond well, they are exceptionally good players. So testosterone, again, turning on estrogen expression in the testicles, and for females, especially perimenopause, xenolytin actually turning on expression in the ovaries, which is important because in perimenopause, those specific females, it's not just an overall, there's a mitochondrial component to it, and then an epigenetic expression component. So if you bring in something like carbon-60 to pull off the mitochondrial load from these ovaries and then turn the epigenetic expression internally, ovaries kick back on and they start functioning normally, and they buy themselves maybe 5 or 10 years before they have to go on HRT. There's a lot of cool ones.
What about, so for the testosterone, what do the males see in that category? You mentioned the testicles working, I get that, but what in terms of like symptom resolution, what do we see there? About half of the effect, if you ever tried HCG or HMG, we get more testicular fullness, ejaculatory rates go up, not just in terms of overall volume, but overall ejaculatory speed, so you get more distance, more overall size. Usually orgasms feel a little bit better, like it's fairly noticeable, where that dopamine oxytocin rush, you get more like a versus just like it's usually pretty noticeable. Sure. So it's probably like half of HCG. Okay, so like for most, it's going to be like libido, sexually based.
Yeah,
what generally. You get from Okay, sure. So you've mentioned a couple of times throughout this the context which these supplements, peptides, etc., can come in a HRT and TRT setting. And I know that you deal with a lot of people who are on those types of protocols. So I think it would be interesting to see your take on what are the most common mistakes or things that you have to alter when people come to you on HRT and TRT and say, dude, look, I'm on this, I have my script, but you know what, I just don't feel that good. I don't feel like I should, right? Yeah. What are the most common things that you have to start changing or taking out, putting in to get people to where they should be when they're on HRT?
Let's pink label this real quick. We're going with the females because that's a big one, okay? Sure. Usually it's being confined to the reference ranges on lab work dictated by Western medicine. So those reference ranges change year to year, and they're accommodating the sick population that's occurring to be pretty dominant. So on lab work for a female, I don't care where her testosterone's at. We want to see where she feels best at. And then if her libido's good, hair's good, there's no clitoral growth, there's no any kind of abnormal facial hair growth, anything like that. If she feels amazing, there's no negative side effects, then we test lab work. And that tells us where your specific reference range should lie. Because a lot of females will be at 15 and feel amazing, and other ones can be at 200 and feel amazing. And you say 200, and people go crazy. They go, she's going to turn into a male. And it just doesn't work that simply. Because then at the same token, you generally, unless if you know what you're doing, you generally don't start off with full HRT replacement in this world. It's usually not testosterone, estradiol, and progesterone, right? It's usually testosterone, because what does that do? Drives more downstream estradiol and cross-stimulates progesterone. So sometimes with just TRT therapy, it solves it all. If it doesn't, then you get your lab work done. You see, okay, testosterone's good as a female, but what's wrong? Estradiol's tanked and progesterone's tanked. Okay, cool. Then we have to bring that in. So we would bring those in. But I think for females, not being confined by reference ranges, I think is one of the most important things. And then if we go to the male side of things, I'm going to stick with this whole blood work side of things because I'm trying to think how to word this. I have a different perspective on everyone else apparently than on SHBG and free testosterone. And love everyone out there. I've never cared about free testosterone because if we look at SHBG, right, sex hormone binding globulin, it's a transport mechanism. So it is pulling that androgen into the nucleus, right? So if you have too high or too low, it causes problems. Too low, that process happens too fast. That's the person that has to microdose testosterone, cypionate, or enanthate every single day because they just cleave and burn through that ester. The person that goes ahead and has too high SHBG, guess what? It's too slow. They're not getting action. So that one shot they took, it takes 3 weeks to actually drive plasma levels. So to me, SHBG matters. It should be moderate, 30, 40, 50, maybe sub 60, somewhere in there. So we don't want it too high, too low. But free testosterone, what does that tell you? That says what's usable, right? What's in the blood. I don't care what's in the blood. I care what's in the nucleus, causing nuclear changes. So by definition, if it's in the blood, it's not in the DNA. So I would rather look at total SHBG and total testosterone. Because if you know your total testosterone, most guys these days, 800, 1200 nanograms per deciliter for HRT, and then blasting and cruising, that can be crazy high. So you can't really use those ratios there. But if you're in that good range and you have good SHBG and you're not seeing the effects you want, it could be downstream estradiol or DHT, but it could also be testosterone just needs to be higher. So to me, free testosterone never made sense. And I respect everyone's opinion, not saying anything against anyone. But again, if it's in the blood, it's not in the nucleus. I only care what's happening at a genetic level. That could be overthinking it, but that's how I've done it for going on 13 years. And it tends to help weed out all those problems whenever people have these issues that no one else has solutions for.
Sure. Now, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this because it's about you, but you have mentioned that you are on nandrolone therapy, right? Which is interesting. So why would someone favor that? Because obviously that tends to be not looked at as an option anymore, perhaps rightfully so. I don't.
Oh yeah.
So why would someone perhaps be a candidate for nandrolone therapy as opposed to going down the traditional testosterone route? And maybe that's for male and female. I don't know. You said.
Yeah. That's okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm allowed to talk about this. So HRT, because we're talking about HRT, we're not talking about anything. We're going through your doctor, prescriptions. I'm not getting in trouble, Jeff. So we have our nandrolone therapies, right? Back in the day, they were prescribable instead of testosterone. Problem was only 50% of people converted enough estradiol in order to generate enough libido, enough neurological functioning. So they're kind of like, we can't really use nandrolone because it only works 50% of the time. So in that same 50%, you have the neurochemical aspect. So nandrolone can be metabolized in the brain and drive up dopamine cascades, or can go over and push up more glutamate levels. You push up more glutamate, you accumulate more neural plaque, and you're the person who takes nandrolone and you feel terrible. You feel like some people get depressed, some people have no libido, like that's a poor responder. If that's you, never take it again, right? If you respond good to it, it'll push down dopamine cascades, also drive up more estradiol levels, and you'll feel happier, libido will feel better, everything, joints, everything goes through the roof. That's me. And for the majority of my life, it's like, okay, I need a TRT, but testosterone, I only ever got negatives. No matter the dose, I got more acne, a little bit of hair loss. Like I just never grew. And it was only in 2020 when I decided, okay, done doing the whole bodybuilding thing. I'm just going to go on HRT, which is 400 milligrams. So not really HRT, but it's what I need to still stay 260 pounds. Only did nandrolone, and then my life completely changed because I wasn't tracing the traditional paradigm of I have to use testosterone. I only did this because I didn't respond well to testosterone. So everyone out there, like I'm not a proponent of nandrolone therapy, like, oh, everyone needs to do it. If you don't respond well to testosterone, look at other options. That's all it is. Because it is probably split 50-50 and maybe even application even less than that. So you have to generate enough estradiol and also generate enough dopamine. Because if not, it will be a negative effector for you, but it's not something to be feared. And then the female side of things, this comes over from the fertility work I've done in conception, gestation, all that cool stuff. If we look at whenever a baby is being born, that placenta, it produces its own variety, kilodalton varieties of growth hormones and different offstreams of testosterones. One of those is 19-nortestosterone. So technically, if you're building a baby, building a fetus, which is one of the most important processes in a female's life, right? Biologically speaking, if nandrolone therapy is there, then it has to be pretty biologically important, right? So technically, nandrolone therapy is just as biologically identical as testosterone, generally less feminizing, because you have less downstream DHT, which causes the abnormal hair growth and other problems in females. Again, if a female responds well to her basic TRT or her normal HRT, awesome, stick with it. But if you don't, nandrolone therapy and NPP might be a better option. So it's more just having tools. Again, nothing's good or bad, but for me, nandrolone therapy was life-changing. And again, from a health aspect, because I know everyone goes down the homocysteine route, homocysteine is lower than ever. IL-6 is like 7. HSCRP is like 0.7. Biological age is 4.4 years younger than I am. Like my health is better than ever. And I've been on 400 milligrams of nandrolone for coming up on 5 years. And I've done everything else right. I haven't, touched androgens in any other way. So there is that context to also keep.
Sure. Are there very unfortunate populations that respond poorly to both?
Yeah.
What do they do?
Nothing. Okay. No, I feel so bad for those guys because they're the guys, and sometimes they're the smartest guys out there. Like they can get results in everyone but themselves. They have all the knowledge, all the application. And like, again, I don't follow anyone online anymore. Back in the day when I did, there were some people who are like, I know they know what they're doing. They're intelligent. They're great at their job, but they were just the hypo-responders of hypo-responders. They got nothing. Absolutely nothing. They got more out of like Tungat Ali and Testolutin than they did of testosterone. And sometimes that just happens. Sure. So then if that's you, don't push down the sex hormone cascade. That's where peptides, bioregulators, mitochondrial supplements, that's where like you kind of have to go because you have no other recourse.
Sure. I mean, it's also very common for people who are going down that HRT, TRT route to be recommended GH peptides in some description of testosterone or whatever it might be. Again, how would one know that that's a good fit for that they need one? Because obviously a lot of this will come, the GH peptides can come with a reasonable cost for people. How do they know that, okay, this is probably worth adding in? If they feel like maybe they need a second opinion, what would they be experiencing that would tell them that that's worth a shout?
So nothing would be needed and essential, but I would say if your recovery is not up on par, like if libido's good, if everything's good, but you want to be slightly better, because like certain people just want to be average, and that's cool. Some people want to be below average. Other people want to be beyond and superhuman. To me, I think it goes back to more the person's psychology. And if you'd rather be more than just okay, you don't have to take growth hormone peptides. But do you want to live with knee pain or hip pain or things like that? Some people don't care. That's cool. But if you don't want to live with that pain, you can bring in a low dose peptide.
Sure. So you've been in a position where you've done much of which you've already mentioned, where you've done a lot of work with companies, franchises, etc., where you've been kind of on the cutting edge of a couple of things, where you've seen the research and stuff. So of what I'm sure you're able to talk about, is there anything really cool on the horizon in the next couple of years that we haven't mentioned?
So we mentioned the exogenous mitochondrial transplantations. One of the things I did for one of the Olympic years was biological 3D printing, which I was not a part of, but I was technically a part of. So just like you can biologically 3D print anything, you can do that with organs and muscles and tendons and ligaments. And so the process I came in was actually driving the motor learning process post-surgery. So athlete X was given this specific surgery, this specific ligament, but they've not had that ligament their entire life. So you have to learn, this is the neurochemistry comes in, you have to learn how to now do that sprint. I guess you can say that. You have to relearn how to do that sprint because now you have the right tendon. So you have to now learn how that organ is actually being implemented into you. And the same thing actually applies to a different degree if you get like a heart transplant or any kind of other kind of organ transplant. But I think that's finally getting close to being more accessible to people because in the past it's been like, one guy, you don't say anything, you keep it under the wraps, and then now 2 people do it. Now there's 4 laboratories, and I think in the next 2 or 3 years, that'll really come out, which is cool because I was doing everything else in the longevity world and the athletic world.
Training. So then it makes you think, well, what's that dude capable of?
Right. That's why I think clear across the spectrum. Like I think across the spectrum of sports, of life, like we have almost infinite potential, infinite possibility. Like I said bodybuilding specifically, I think that might be capped because you can only get so big before it looks bad. But then you can also change the argument and go, what if we can now change the insertions on that person to have the better, and then you could really start to manufacture these people, which is cool. I like that. I think that's cool. But I think overall, there's so much potential, and it's so exciting. It's so cool to be a part of. Like I can't believe this is my life. Even to come out, talk to you guys. Like I still get to go home, see my kids tonight, play with them after school. Like I literally am living the best life. It's cool to be surrounded by people like you.
I think it'd be unfair to not mention the Longevity Revolution film that you played a part, because we're all going to know about that at some point, right? And you played a part in that. So do you want to just briefly mention what that is?
Yeah, that was crazy. I got a text on Saturday night from one of my clients. He was like, hey, do you want to be in a movie? And I'm like, a couple of days beforehand, me and my wife were watching the Liver King documentary. And I jokingly said on the ground, I was phone rolling, I'm like, I never want to be in a Netflix documentary. And she laughed and she said, don't worry, you'll never get the opportunity. And then 3 days later, we get that text. And it was like, hey, got to be out in New York on Thursday. So we got to plan it. But then they didn't get back to us for a couple of days. So it was last minute fly out. And it was such a fun experience. They brought me in as like they said peptide guru. I don't like the name guru, but whatever. But it was talking about peptides, bioregulators, and it's going to be fascinating. They are going to have, and by the way, I know they're still accepting investors, so reach out on their Instagram where I can connect you guys. But they're going to have, I think as of now, confirmed, there's going to be Robert De Niro, Halle Berry. I think they're going through the list of like all the A-list people. I was in it, Dr. Shapiro. Like they're going to be getting everyone in this. So it's ideal. I think the trailer might come out in August. I think that was hopefully the right time frame. So it's going to be cool. I'm really excited. And I think I'm supposed to go back out for more filming at some point. So it's a really cool opportunity. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah. No, how can people find you?
theprepcoach.com. Biggest one. Instagram is something. We'll put it in the show notes because it's just not, it's like, to me, it's not important information. Yeah. So I don't like keep it in my memory bank. And then school.com/TPC Army. Got a members group over there I just started and I love that. That's it. Pretty easy to find.
Well, I want to thank you for coming out. This has been great. Tom, thank you for hosting, and we're done.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
All content you see on this channel and at EliteFTS.com is created by, take a guess, EliteFTS. If you want to help support the content, head over to EliteFTS.com and pick up literally anything that you need to be able to get more jacked and strong.